Good morning. There we go. Okay. Today's Tuesday, April the 16th. This is the Budget and Finance Committee meeting for the Recreation Centers of Sun City West. My name is Dick Rhodes. I'm the chairman of the committee. We have 4 items on our agenda today, and I think you're going to find them all very interesting. Before we start, well, let's go ahead and go through the Pledge of Allegiance, establish the quorum, okay? So if you'd stand. Okay, the meeting is called to order. We've done the pledge. We have a quorum. We have all of the members of our Budget and Finance Committee are here. And I'll present the minutes from April the 2nd. If there's any comments or questions on that, if not, we'll file them as presented. Okay, they'll be filed. I want to set a few ground rules this morning. This is going to be, our agenda is a bit different today. It's not necessarily the way that we would normally set up an agenda because our last 2 items are really kind of out of context a little bit. So I want to say right now that our last 2 presenters will be on a timer, and I'm going to ask our AV people, if we would set our timer for them for 15 minutes, okay? And then at the end, we will have an opportunity for questions from the audience and also questions from YouTube. That will be on a timer for 2 minutes, and will permit you to speak once, okay? And that includes our homeowners that are watching us on YouTube now. So at that, let's go ahead and move forward. We have item 3.01 is an update on the golf-related capital budget for Mesa Irrigation Project, and our manager, Todd Patty, will speak to that.
All right, good morning. Today, I have an update for you on the cost of the irrigation project. But before we get to that, I just want to give you a little timeline on the bid request that we put in. Back in late February, design plans and documents were submitted for bidding. Bid requests were sent out to the 3 vendors, Landscapes Unlimited, Heritage, and Wadsworth. We did receive the 3 bids, sealed bids, back on March 5th. And then staff reviewed bids and requested line item detail from the 3 vendors. Bids were resubmitted and received at the end of last month. So with that, Terry, I might need you to, there we go. Before we get to the numbers, I just wanted to go over this cost comparison from the Grandview project that we did in 2022 to the today, the 24 project it's scheduled for, or 25 project it's scheduled for Echo Mesa. And you can see the irrigation cost per acre at Grandview, 39, and then Echo Mesa is at 49. So about a $10,000 increase per acre with that project. And then you get into the landscape portion of it, which is the rock, the plants, and the trees, the irrigation and drip system for all those plants. About a $6,000 per acre increase from the Grandview project. The Rainbird rotors or heads, you can see the unit price at $238 per head back when we were doing the irrigation project over at Grandview, and it's up to $269. So a $30 increase on the heads. Now, when this, if this project is approved, we can lock that price in. So that's a pretty firm price at $30.74. And then on the decomposed granite for the desert areas, Grandview was a little over $55 per ton. Echo Mesa now is up to $74 per ton, so an $18.73 increase on the landscape. Now that could go up because of fuel prices. That's what really drives that, because of all the trucks that are coming in. So the diesel price is really going to play a part in that. And then just a cost review. I mentioned the three vendors that bid on this: Heritage, Landscapes Unlimited, and Wadsworth. Landscapes Unlimited is the company that did the project over at Grandview. So you can see Wadsworth came in low at $5,066,000. So if you look at the total project cost with the low bid, with going with Wadsworth, you have everything that's involved in the project: the design team, that's Marvin Mills; on the irrigation, that's Gary Brawley; on the golf course design, and then Wadsworth, their quality control. And then the pump station connection, that's also with the transfer line that we have over there at Echo Mesa. So the project cost right now is $5.5 million. A while back, through the reserve study, we put in $5,050,000. So you see it has gone up since then, and the difference is $482,835 right now with the new prices. So earlier this morning, I was just to have some fun, I wanted to see if we were doing the irrigation project and turf reduction project over at Grandview today with these prices, what that would cost. Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the Grandview project, $7.1 million, all said and done. If we were to do that today with these new prices, it would be just a little over $9 million. So big difference. So anyway, that's my update today on the cost of irrigation and turf removal project at Echo Mesa, and that's scheduled to start in April 7th of next year, 2025. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Todd. Do any of the committee members, Mr. Bosak?
Todd, the rotors, are we doing a one-for-one, or is there a complete new design on the pattern that is being implemented? And is it plus or minus to what we had before?
It's probably a plus, actually, and it is a new design with the spacing. We're going to be on 60-foot spacing on center. So it's just like what we did at Grandview, and we're seeing really good results with that over at Grandview. The distribution uniformity rates are something I haven't seen on any of our golf courses ever. So I'm really excited about doing that. And of course, that equals good turf conditions. You know, few wet spots, few dry spots. And so I'm really excited about that.
Any other questions? Mr. Bernardo?
Thank you, Dick. Todd, looking at the three bids that you received, if I heard you correctly, we used Landscapes Unlimited to do Grandview. They did a great job, and we're real happy with their performance. Wadsworth, have they been selected? Have we signed a contract with them yet?
We have not signed a contract with them yet, but we are looking at them. And that was my concern. You know, Landscapes Unlimited, they did such a great job over there at Grandview, really very thorough, and followed up on everything. And so with Wadsworth, I did some checking, and the irrigation consultant, Marvin Mills, and even Gary Brawley have worked with them and said they even think that they're even better than Landscapes Unlimited. So that was comforting to know that, because that was my concern. I'm going, because Grandview was such a success that I didn't want to go backwards on that. So apparently Wadsworth, they're very good, and in some cases could even be better than Landscapes Unlimited.
Good, good. And that's great news. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Before we open it up to the floor, Cliff, I want to just verify that this money will be coming out of the reserve fund.
Yeah, so this is what we'll do is we adjust the fully funded balance for this, and the money does come out of the reserve fund to pay for this. I'm going to give you an answer to a question I think you're going to ask, which is what's the impact on the reserve fund? And it's taking our projected 25 budget FFB percent down from 47 to 46. So $500,000, roughly a point, if you think about it in terms of the fully funded balance. So that's the impact on the reserve fund.
Director Novello?
Thank you, Chairman Rhodes. I believe though, Cliff and all, we've been fortunate that we have a really nice 5-6 year rollout plan from Todd and his team. We've been projecting these impacts for, as I recall, for a couple of years now. No surprises in terms of projection.
Yes, and I will say, on projects like this, things like the cost of oil, cost of supplies, those types of things, how available the workforce is in terms of projects that are out there, and the bidding process. So these could fluctuate up or down
Sure.
throughout time.
Yeah, just doing a little, like, I guess a little commercial for all of us on the committee as well. I think we know it, but for all of us listening as well. This is one of the benefits when we have a really big investment like this, that one of the benefits of having a multi-year view or, some strategic types of view is that when you have a big investment like this, you can start to model it out. So it does really benefit us, and thank you for continuing to keep us updated on those fluctuations. Appreciate it.
Dr. Miller?
Todd, when we did Grandview, there were plat maps put out in the clubhouse so that people could see what was going to happen. I haven't seen anything that I remember, at least, about Echo Mesa. Are those going to be available?
Yes, they are. In fact, I should have some maps out next week. The large size map that shows the front 9 and the back 9, but then individual whole maps in a booklet that we'll put in the pro shop there.
Okay. Will that be online like it was last time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Parsons?
Yes, Todd. The contract with Wadsworth, is that going to be a firm fixed price?
Yeah. I'm going to say yes. Now, I'd like to also remind everybody on the Grandview project, we came in about $418,000 under budget on that, and that's as a result of making changes on the fly in the field daily and changing some things up, like let's do a different size rock here, let's not do that, let's not put that many plants in, or let's not put those trees over there and stuff. So it's real savings. Now we're going to do the same thing when we get over to the Echo Mesa project. So if we can make some changes to the original plan, we will, and hopefully we will save a little bit of money through that. So hopefully that answers your question.
Mr. Bosak?
I'm really glad you're able to use Wadsworth, Todd, because I think doing someone else will give you a little bit of leverage. The next time around, you'll have some people more conscious of sharpening their pencil, if you will, and if they're reputed to be even better than what we got at Grandview, then it's a win-win.
Absolutely. And we're doing the same thing with the pump station. We're going to go with a different pump station so that we can kind of get a comparison of what works, because we know we're going to have to do this again over at Stardust and Pebblebrook and then even further out at the other golf courses, so we can get a good idea of what pump station works best for us.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay, I'd like to open the, yes, Mr. Finelli.
Thanks, Dick. I just wanted to maybe step in, and this is a sizable amount of money. It spooks up probably a lot of the members. But as I work the reserve study, I just want to remind everybody that, and Todd can affirm this, that most irrigation systems that we have in our reserve study only have a 35-year life based upon the type of piping that was done in the past. But what they're installing here, we're estimating is going to have 70, 80, 90-year life. And if I have a $3 million project over 30 years, essentially the method is putting $100,000 a year away to fund the replacement. When you put that same $5 million over 80, 90 years, there's going to be considerable savings for every one of these projects that we put in. So sometimes startles people, but there is a very substantial back-end benefit.
Yeah, and as they say at the end of the day, that really makes a difference with us and on the governing board when we look at the budget and the computation for the dues for that particular year.
Pete's right. We're going to get a lot of life out of that, out of the main line and the laterals with that pipe that we used, anywhere from maybe 80 to 100 years. So that's a good thing. As time goes on, we're going to have to replace the rotors. Valves are going to need to be replaced, and drip emitters and pump stations and software programs. But the underground, the main part of it, will be here for a long time. We won't have to touch that.
Mr. Bignato?
Quickly, Todd, do we have to go underneath the street on Echo Mesa Drive?
Yes, we do. We have to go from, on Echo Mesa Drive, yep, over to 10T, and then also from 18 Green back over to the putting green. Yep. And then we have the other road crossings over on Trail Ridge Drive from 12 to 13, and also 15 over to 16. And then on the front nine, we have 2 to 3, and then 7 to 8. So,
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee, Mr. Bosak?
Just to remind everybody, golf's $11 million business out of a $28 million total revenue for the community. So it's not, shouldn't be lost on people that this is an investment, and it keeps us competitive with our neighbors and puts us in a position to maintain, if not build, that dollar amount.
yeah. You know, we talk about projects, want versus need projects, and this is definitely a need project for sure. You know, the irrigation system over at Echo Mesa is pushing 40 years, and it's failing, and a lot of repairs every week on that system, so we have to do that. And then as far as taking turf out, you know, we have the state mandate to reduce groundwater pumping. And they don't tell you that you have to take out turf. They just say, here's your new allotment to reduce groundwater pumping. So, but by removing turf is probably the number one way of saving water. There's other things that we can do on the golf course, and we do that all the time, but definitely removing turf is the number one way of reducing groundwater pumping. So I feel comfortable with the direction that we're going to be in compliance come 2025, where they reduce our allotments even a little bit more. But I think everything that we're doing, we're going to be in good shape. Now, if they have another management plan that comes out, say the 6th management plan or 7th management plan, it's going to reduce allotments, I think, you know, we'll address it at that time, but I think we're in good shape. Really do. You know, as far as the irrigation systems go, I know we're only doing the 4 courses right now, but we're eventually going to have to go over to Trail Ridge, Deer Valley, and Desert Trails. We don't have to remove turf over there. We're already in compliance with the amount of acreage of turf that we have. But those, you know, by the time we finish up Pebblebrook in 2029, it's going to be time to go over to those other golf courses and address those irrigation systems as well.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? We'll open it up to questions from the floor. Christine, do we have anyone online?
No questions yet online.
Before we dismiss you, Mr. Patty, I would like to say, and this is a kind of a personal comment, that I always have a high degree of confidence in you and the research that you've done and the work that you do. So when you come in and you explain this to us in a clear and concise way that we understand it, I just appreciate that, and I want to commend you for being you and for having the level of confidence that we have.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I've got a great team, and I lean on them all the times for information and stuff. So they're a big help. Couldn't do it without them. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Our next agenda item is item 3.02. It's an executive summary of the proposed FY2024-25 budget and the financial plan. And I'm going to introduce Cliff Swan, but Cliff, before I do want to make some opening comments on this. We have seen this budget on multiple occasions, and we've talked about it on multiple occasions. The intent of this particular presentation is to pretty much close it down. It's pretty much to try to come up with a final recommendation that we can move forward to the governing board. So we've kind of promised that we will go through and do this again. And so, Mr. Swan, I'm going to turn this over to you so you can give us a summary. And then I'm going to come back to the committee to say, let's talk about this and see what we can, if we have a recommendation. So, Mr. Swan, it's yours.
Okay, thank you, Director Rhodes, and good morning, committee and community. I will start off by saying that we've got our budget forums coming up tomorrow evening here at 5:30 and Thursday morning here at 9 a.m. So we'll present to the community then. as well. And I want to also thank this committee, as well as our community, and of course, the management team and the finance team for this process. This is my third time going through this process here at the Rec Centers of Sun City West, and every time we do it, we learn something, and it's been a great experience, so I want to thank everyone for that. So with that said, okay, so all of these services, when we put the budget together, we have our budget goals, and our goals and our budget goals are to provide the services at the service level, and at the same time, protect the assets of the association, as well as making sure that we're keeping the standards up at the Rec Centers of Sun City West. So what that means is we have all of these services that we provide here, and you can kind of go around this wheel and see what those services are, but it takes an operating budget and it takes a capital improvement budget to achieve our budget goals. Okay, and that's what we strive to do when we put these budgets together, to provide these services at least as good, if not better, than we have provided them in the previous budget year. So that's our goal when we do this. So throughout that process, we go through cost management and efficiencies. So when we look at these, we have a reserve study, for example, that ties in all of our facilities as well as our equipment and our resource, and we analyze that and do as much research and work on that to determine if something needs to be replaced or if it can be maintained and used moving forward. So that's part of our cost management and our efficiencies. We also look at, when it comes to process improvements with employee safety and employee training, and look at best practices. So if we find something that works and is efficient in one area, we deploy that in other areas. So we're constantly looking at how can we get better at what we do and how can we be more efficient. And then we also look at when we're bidding projects. Todd just stood up here and talked about the bidding process for the Echo Mesa project. We bid everything over 50,000, over 5,000. We even bid items under 5,000 to make sure that we're getting the best pricing. Now, pricing doesn't always determine, because, for example, we have Toro equipment. It makes sense to stay with Toro because we can use parts and things from old equipment from Toro. So we do manage that process, but we go out to bid for all of our equipment and our projects when it comes to capital improvement and it comes to supplies and equipment. But we're also looking at competitive pricing analysis when it comes to our bowling rates, our golf rates, and the services that we provide here that we provide to the public. So these all go into the cost management and efficiencies. And finally, whenever we can deploy a technology improvement, Todd talked about the sprinkler heads and the software with Rainbird, for example, we try and deploy that and at the same time create efficiencies and savings for the community. And we presented 7 pages of cost savings measures in a prior meeting. You can go back and refer to those, but those are just some examples of things that we do on an ongoing basis or things that we come up with as we're operating throughout the year. Those are built into this operating budget. So looking at the operating budget, I'm just going to provide a quick summary as to what's been presented and where we're at. So some of the expense assumptions are for wages and benefits. We have a 3% non-minimum wage employee increase to this budget to cover our merit raise process, as well as any job adjustments that are done throughout the year if we have to go to market for a job and we determine that we're not paying enough for that job and we have to beef up that position. So we build that into this budget. Okay, and those and the merit raises, we've talked a little bit about that. I just want to reiterate the point that merit raises can be up to 3%. We do an evaluation on every person that is eligible for a merit raise, and that's done in September, and the merit raises are determined based on the grade that they receive in their evaluation. And it could be anywhere. It generally averages, if we have a 3% cap, it generally averages around 2.25% on whole for the whole group of employees that are being evaluated. So that's the way we do that, and those go into effect January 1. So that they would go into effect January 1, 2025. Also built in wages and benefits, we have a $1 increase for Arizona mandated minimum wage increases. Once again, those will go into effect January 1. And then we've got as well a workers' comp increase. We received our workers' comp rates, and the good news is we're trending in the correct direction. The bad news is that we've got some things that weren't necessarily in our control that were impacting those rates. And that created a 35% increase in this budget to our workers' comp insurance. Our health insurance, we came in this year at a 5% increase. We made some changes to the plan and drove some employee behavior, changed our rates that we decreased in one of our insurance options to drive some behavior to create some savings on the plan. And we were able to do that and keep the increase down to 5%. We are budgeting a 15% effective January 1, 2025. Hopefully we can come in better than that. But again, we have to look at what our claims history are going to be and how that's going to impact our increases for next year. So we budgeted 15% for that. And property insurance, we're going to have a presentation on that on May 7th, Budget and Finance Committee meeting. I encourage anybody who's interested in that to attend. And we had a 14.8% increase in property insurance, and that was not due to bad claims history. I know my personal property insurance has gone up significantly, not because I had any claims. Unfortunately, we're seeing the impacts of what's going on in the market, but we'll give some more details on that on May 7th. So that's in this budget as well. Utilities, we got caught this year a little bit on the budget with utilities, with the rate increases that we had and on some of the, abnormal weather conditions that we experienced in the fall last year. So we're budgeting a 5% increase in utilities, which is it's a big dollar amount. It's $125,000 increase in just utilities. So it has a big impact when it goes up a small percentage. And then overall, we put a 3% inflation factor in for non-payroll operating expenses. As you all know, I don't know if you know, but the inflation numbers just came out for March, and this just in, it's not transitory. So we're still experiencing inflation, and it's still taking root, and it's impacting our budget. So when we took a look at our non-payroll operating expenses, we started at 3%, and then we cut back where we knew we would have savings, and then looked at some individual items to see where we needed to increase. But that's built in this budget as well. So to handle these increases, we've proposed the following changes to our fees. And at first is our membership dues. We are proposing in this budget a 5.6% increase, taking the dues from $540 to $570. It's a $30 increase for the year for our annual member dues. We're budgeting 291,000 lines in the bowling sports pavilion. And so we introduced a new rate there to capture some more revenue from our non-resident, non-league bowlers, and then as well as adding some tournaments during the non-busy times to try and utilize those lanes even more. But at 291,000 lines of bowling, we're the busiest bowling alley in the state of Arizona. On the golf side, we're budgeting 320,000 rounds of golf. We feel comfortable budgeting 320,000 rounds. We've got through the inclement weather phase for the most part. I mean, we're still in April, but we've had a good spring this spring, and we feel comfortable with 320,000 That's gone up from 280,000 on average. So that's, of course, great news because that just adds additional revenue to help cover the expenses that we have. And with that said, we are proposing a $6 to $8 increase during peak and transition seasons for our non-member golf, so our guests and public. What came out of golf committee was to align the guest and public rate. We had a difference in pricing in those rates, and they made a recommendation to the board to align those, so that $2 difference is now, those rates are the same for public and guest, member guest golfers. And ultimately, the governing board will vote on that, but that was their recommendation coming out of golf. And then a $2 increase during the summer for those non-member golfers. And then we did a CMP card increase from $1,575 to $1,600. And then when it comes to our members, our owner members, we implemented a $2 increase during peak season. So that's peak season is November through April. So we'll have a $2 increase in next year's budget for the peak season for our members, and a $1 increase during the transition and summer seasons. And then we adjusted our unlimited card from $3,600 to $3,800, and our Twilight card from $1,399 to $1,500. Those cards were adjusted because we have to also implement an increase on those cards because they don't pay for the round when they arrive. It's all included, so we had to increase those rates to be fair. And then looking at the employee golf rate, we increased that from $12 to $15. So just a little historical look. If we take a look at our dues for the last 20 years, and we look at the run rate for the last 20 years, I put that on here. I wanted to show that from 2005 to 2014, the dues went up $228. And that was on an average 10-year inflation rate of 2.4%. Okay? If you take a look at the last 10 years, 2015 to 2024, the dues went up $132. So they went up roughly $100 less than they did the prior 10 years. And that's at a higher 10-year average inflation rate of 2.7. So I wanted to show that just to show historically what we've done with the dues. And you can see in the last 10 years, there's been 2 years where we've had a zero dues increase. Typically when that happens, we follow that up with 2 years of larger increases. So one of those years was a COVID year. So nobody knew what was going to happen then. So I understand that for sure. But, I just want to show this to show that, for the last 10 years, we haven't done anything unusual or out of the ordinary when you look at the 20-year dues increase rate. So back to the assumptions. In capital assumptions, we look at, in the capital section, we've got our reserve fund allocation and our asset preservation fee. Those are both inflows into our reserve fund. Those in this budget are, we're increasing the APF fee from $5,000 to $5,200, and we're budgeting 1,100 title transfers, and that'll return roughly $5.8 million. So into our reserve fund, which is phenomenal. I mean, that's people buying into the community. So people coming here and being able to immediately take advantage of the investments that have been made by the residents who have lived here over time, they buy into that. And it's a great thing, and it helps us pay for capital improvements and new capital, which is phenomenal. And then, so in this capital section, there's something called an estimated reserve fund allocation. That's going to be roughly 7.5% this year, and that'll return roughly, well, it'll be $1,157,000 into our reserve fund from operations. So after we collect all of our dues and all of our fees and pay for the operations of the rec centers of Sun City West, 618,000 hours worked, $29 million budget total. We'll have $1,157,000 from operations to put into our reserve fund. And policy states that our reserve fund is to be funded by our APFs, investment income, and cash over cash inflow from operations. So taking a look at that on a financial statement, what all that means, you can see here all the different expense categories and the percent increases attributable to there. But overall, 5% increase in operating expenses in this budget to be covered by the increases in the following areas of our on the revenue section. 5% increase there to cover those increase in expenses. So we talked about the estimated reserve fund allocation. So in this budget, last year, in last year's budget, we had a little over $1 million budgeted to go into the reserve fund. In this year's budget, we've got $1,157,000 going directly into the reserve fund, which is 7.53% of the member dues revenue. So in the capital section, you can see where those lie. Again, all inflows to the reserve fund, APF fees, estimated reserve fund allocation, and investment income in there as well at $945,000. So a quick summary of the capital improvement budget. We've got in this budget currently $637,000 in new capital improvement projects that will get voted on by the governing board in a couple of weeks. And then we've got roughly $9.9 million in repair and replacement, and that includes in that $9.9 million is the $5.5 million irrigation project Todd just presented in the $9.9 million. And then we've got $420,000 in allowances. So this is the exciting part of the presentation. It's the reserve fund, okay? Yes. So this is what it's all about right here. This is it. So when we look at the reserve fund, ultimately what impacts the reserve fund determines how healthy our community is. It's what drives everything that we do here. We've got a reserve study that's got 1,200 line items that tells us it's planning for the inevitable. We know that things are going to age out and we're going to have to replace them. And the forefathers for the last 40 years, 40 plus years, 46, I guess, have done a wonderful job at planning for this, planning for the reserve fund. So I like, this is a different way to present it rather than the modeling slides, but I think it's very impactful because you can see in here, you have the reserve fund inflows and the reserve fund outflows. So if you look at the reserve fund outflows and you take a look at the budget year of $10,994,000 and project that all the way out through 28-29, you'll see there's roughly $48 million in capital improvements that we're going to do over the next 5 years. How are we going to pay for that? Well, this is how we're going to pay for it. This is what we do. So in the reserve fund inflow, there's the $1,157,000, okay, from operations. That comes from dues and golf and all the different fees we collect. That's what's left over after we pay for operations, okay? And then we've got the APFs. Wonderful thing. $6 million a year, up to $7 million a year, we'll collect in APFs. And then investment income. This is wonderful. We're showing basically how we're going to pay for all of this $48 million in capital improvements over the next 5 years. And then down at the bottom, you'll see the impact to the reserve fund. What's that going to do to the reserve fund calculation at the end of the year? Is it going to increase, or are we going to decrease our reserve fund to pay for this? Because we still have to pay, even though we might not see. You'll see in budget year 24-25, we're only generating $7.9 million, but we got $11 million going out. Okay, so that's going to reduce our reserve fund by $3.1 million. All right. So what does that reserve fund look like? Well, if you look at 26, you'll see, or 24-25, we're projecting it to be $26 million. We're going to spend $48 million, and we're going to drop by $1 million in our reserve fund over the next 5 years. That's incredible, okay? And down at the bottom, when I talk about how healthy is our reserve fund, this tells us how healthy our reserve fund is. Policy says it has to be, we have to have at least 40% of the value of what our fully funded balance is in our bank, okay, in our reserve fund to be healthy. Well, that's the policy. okay? So you can see, even after all of that spend, we're still projected to be at 44%. And the next year it goes up to 47%. So it goes right back up. We just have some big irrigation projects that we're doing over the next 5 years. That's exciting news. That's why I get excited about this, because this is incredible. And this is, again, these are decisions that have been made over time and investments that have been made. And they've been, at times, tough decisions, but they've been very good decisions. So we're going to talk a little bit about, now that we talked about the budget, we have something out there that's currently, we're going to switch gears here. We need to, there's something out there in the legislation, or not in the legislation, but that's currently out for signatures to get on the ballot next year, and that's to take the minimum wage up to $18 an hour. That would have a very significant impact on what we do here in our budget. 76% of our employees are impacted directly by minimum wage. So when I say directly, that means that they're either at minimum wage or the position right above them supervises those employees. Okay, so when we talk about the impact of $18 an hour, it's very significant. The timeline in this is that on July 3rd, it's currently out for signatures. There's roughly 56,000 signatures that need to be obtained for this initiative, and the initiative we'll find out after July 3rd, sometime in July, if they get the signatures, and the signatures will get certified, it'll get on the ballot for the November vote. We'll find that out in July, and then we'll find out sometime after November 8th if it passes. And if it does, minimum wage, we budgeted $1 in this budget. If it passes, the minimum wage will go from $14.35 currently to $18 an hour. And that'll be effective January 1, 2025. So the impact of that, we've got 455 employees that would be impacted by this. Now, they wouldn't all go up. The difference between $14.35 and $18 an hour is $3.65. They're not all going up $3.65. That'll get phased in the job grades. But the impact would impact 455 of our 489 employees. So we have 11 salaried employees that would be impacted by that. And when I talk about this, so some people say, well, you just do it for the minimum wage people. Well, I like to give an example. Imagine you had a piece of paper and had 4 things written on it. That's the job description of someone making minimum wage. Grab 4 pieces of paper, front to back, full of lines of things that a person making $20 an hour is responsible for. Imagine somebody going up from $14 an hour to $18 an hour, and all they do is these 4 things. And this person making $20 an hour has 4 pages of things they're responsible for, and you don't do anything for them. Okay? So that's not how we would manage, and that's not how we would deploy this when it happened. Because let's face it, if we're responsible employees and we supervise people and we have more responsibilities, we have more skin in the game, you get paid more, that's America. So that's how we're doing it. With that said, in this operating budget, that would have an impact of $800,000 to our operating budget in this budget, which would be a 6-month impact. So this committee had asked operations, well, what's the contingency plan? What are we going to do if that happens? And we talked about it earlier. It's about the reserve fund. It really is, at the end of the day, how much money do we have in our reserve fund? It tells us how healthy we are as a community. So with that said, we came up with a strategy or contingency plan, if that happens, that we could put into place right away. So it's been adjusted a little bit, but ultimately, this is the plan. So currently, in the new capital budget requests, there's 3 projects. There's the Lizard Acres remodel, the library design, and the Coots Court redesign. That is roughly $375,000. If those don't get approved, they go back into the reserve fund anyway, we're good, right? If they do get approved, in this contingency plan, we will delay and ultimately eliminate those if $18 an hour happens. So if we find out on July 4th that $18 an hour doesn't make the ballot, we proceed as normal. If we find out on July 4th or 5th that it gets on the ballot, then we wait to see what happens in November. And if it doesn't pass in November, we move forward with those projects. If it does pass, we hold. We don't spend the funds on those 3 projects if they're approved in the budget. The other parts of this contingency is that $420,000 in allowances. That's used for throughout the year. We have some unexpected stuff that happens. There may be a well pump or something that goes down, and that's what those funds are used for. So that would be an example of an emergency. But sometimes we decide that it makes sense to move a project up that's on the reserve study and aligning it with a project that's currently going on. One example would be the flooring in the sports pavilion. We decided to do the flooring at the same time as the bowling lanes because it made sense to do it. We used allowance funds to do that. So that would be an example of a use of allowance funds as well. With that said, we would hold those funds for emergency purposes only. So we would just use it to repair a well pump that went down during overseed because we kind of need that, or else we're going to lose all that seed that we just put down. So anyway, that would be an example. So we anticipate $125,000 in savings in our allowance funds. That would go back into the reserve fund again, and then once again, it would be on the same timeline: delay, eliminate if it goes through that. And then finally, we have $100,000 in the operating budget for some seal and stripes, parking lot seal and stripes, and as well as cart path repairs. Redos. We ultimately eliminate those in this budget if we had to, and that the impact of all these would return $600,000 back to the reserve fund of the $825,000 that we would be impacted, and that's what that looks like in the modeling. So that would get us back to the fully funded balance, less $225,000 if it did happen. And that would be that's the contingency plan in its current form that's being presented. And that wraps up my budget presentation. Director Rhodes.
I'm going to ask if the committee needs any type of clarity. The purpose of this was to serve as a point where we can initiate discussion on the budget. So if you have questions, this would be the time to do it. Otherwise, I'll open it up to the floor, and then I want to bring it back and where we can put some closure to this. Now, do you have a question, Mr. Bogdanov?
Thank you, Dick. Don't I always? Can we bring up slide 5, please? I'll go to my first question. It's the easier one. At the bottom there, the employee golf rate is going from projected to go from $12 to $15. Is that rate offered to all employees throughout the community or just golf operations employees?
All employee. Well, the rate is for part-time employees during peak season, but golf is offered to all employees. So part-time employees during peak season must pay $15 to golf.
But any employee
during the week. So if you're a full-time employee, you're not required to pay $15. You are, however, taxed on that through payroll.
Okay. The other question, and I understand, I mean, I listened to the golf committee meeting where they went back and forth about having a member guest rate and an outside play rate. And I just can't buy into the idea that somehow, and this is pretty much what was said in the meeting, that people who are playing golf as resident guests somehow need to be categorized as outside play, and so that's why we're going to go back to the one rate like we had before. I just don't see how that's even feasible, that resident guests can somehow get away with something when they really should be outside play. Can you explain how that can happen?
I don't know that it's necessarily that they're gaming the system. I think the recommendation was made because they thought of member guests not so much as someone coming in from Iowa and visiting, but more as someone driving over from one of the surrounding communities. And they determined that it was their thought process that those people shouldn't get a discount. I mean, I think that is what came out. I would encourage you to watch the committee meeting, the BNF committee meeting in March. I'm sorry, not BNF, golf committee meeting in March to get the context of what that is. But I think that's the gist of what they're saying. So it wasn't like they were doing something that they couldn't do. It's just that they didn't feel that those people should get a discount.
So a resident, any resident, calls up their friends and says, hey, let's play at my course on a Saturday. And he brings in 3 players from outside that could be playing somewhere else, but because a resident has invited them in, are now being treated like they're outside players. And so they have to pay the same rate as someone who simply calls in from some other community and says, hey, I want to play golf at your course, and could you please book me in? So there's no resident involved in that transaction. And I just, what does it matter if they come from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, or Scottsdale? They're a guest of a resident, and they should get a resident rate, just as they have been up until what's proposed to happen now. So I really think that needs to be looked at again.
Yeah,
And
could I interrupt here,
Sure.
Frank? I think that this is an issue that was recommended by the golf committee, and it's one that will probably lie resident, or the approval on this or disapproval with the governing board. I'm not sure that we can put Cliff on the spot here, because he's really kind of the messenger. He's telling us what's happened. I think for our purposes now, when we discuss this, if you feel strongly about this, I think we can, if anything, we'll bring it up here in the committee, and then if we receive consensus on the committee, we would then kind of counter that recommendation back to the governing board.
Works for me, thanks.
Okay, good, thank you. Do we have other questions? Do we have anyone in the audience that has a question for Cliff? Do we have anyone online, Christine?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do have a question from Gary Bach, 135435. Reserve allocation for 24-25 is $1,157,374, but in 25-26 and beyond, it's 1.5 million, an increase of 342,626. Why is there such a large difference?
So when we put together modeling, we look at what we've done historically, and historically, we usually have fallen around the 1.5 million to 2 million income from operations. So when we do the modeling, we take a look at that. We do a look back and then anticipate where we think we'll end up. So that's why that's more than the current year budget, because we typically end up a little higher than we budget.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to conclude this discussion. I want to, before we open it up to the committee, I want everyone to be consciously aware of the time. It's 5 minutes till 10. Now, and that's plenty of time. I just want to make sure that everyone knows we still have to cover the discussion for the budget here, and then we're going to have 2 very interesting presentations, one from Pickleball and one from the tennis club, and I'm sure that will generate some discussion. So that's just a nice to know information, all right?
Okay.
So at that, we're going to open this up to the committee so we can discuss this. Now, I would remind everyone, we've seen this before. We've talked about it. We've really never come to closure on it, and this is our opportunity. Frank, this would be a perfect opportunity to talk about the issue that you just talked with Cliff. And if the committee feels strongly enough to move it forward, we can. If not, we won't. Okay? So at that, I open it up to the committee. So who wants to comment or have any comments? Okay, Ms. Kellis.
Cliff, I'm just wondering if we should give consideration. I understand the raise in annual dues, membership dues, and we have to. Inflation hits and we've got to do it. And I know there's been a lot of argument about, oh, I don't use the facilities, I should get a break. Well, you signed on, you knew what you were getting into. But I wonder if we should consider some of our aged people, maybe 90 years and above, if once they hit that 90th birthday, they can be frozen at what the annual dues are at that time so it doesn't continue to grow, just with the thoughts of maybe restricted incomes and less use. I don't know if that's worth even talking about, but I thought I'd throw it out there.
Respond to that. I think that for our purposes here, what we want to do is to look at the budget as we have it. That is an issue that I think that we would want to deal with on a standalone. That if we felt that there was a special circumstances where we wanted to make accommodations for that. But I think for the purposes of this discussion, I think that would be outside of what we're trying to do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Are you satisfied with that then?
I suppose so. I just wanted to put it out there as a suggestion, a thought, because I know that you will get hit with, oh, we don't need our dues going up again. And it's part of life right now. We're all getting hit with inflation, and that's kind of hard to just stop. Just thought maybe that was something worth discussing.
Director Novello?
Thank you, Chairman Rhodes. I think it's a very responsible budget. We've been talking about it for a while. But no one likes to hear the idea of yet another thing going up in our budget, right? So sort of, building on what Lynn had said, none of us really like it. I can't say that it resonates with me or probably with most members, but it's very responsible when we go through and we dig in. I guess the big question for me, it's a little bit more process, Chairman Rhodes, but personally, I'm looking forward to going to the budget forums tomorrow and Thursday, I believe they are, right? I want to hear from people, in addition to people who come up and approach us as committee members and governing board members. People will write to us and give us feedback and comments, which that's the whole idea. But I want to hear from others. So I'm really looking forward to hearing those comments before we finalize any recommendation. I think you've done that in the past. Am I correct? I don't know necessarily adjusting the presentations, but you'll listen to the comments and we'll have some kind of a response, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
But
I'm
in
not
any
sure what
event,
the timing on the recommendation from BNF has been in the past. I'd have to go back and look. But as far as the feedback from the community, absolutely listen
Yeah.
to that.
I think
and
we
it's
can make
also for the
I don't
board.
want to, I know we're going to make a recommendation today, but I do
Oh.
believe we need to listen to our community. So I think the timing is a little bit odd. That's all.
Oh, okay.
I think we do have, let me look at the calendar here. Next BNF is May 7th.
So perhaps
It's May 7th, so.
it's really close.
Yeah, it is close. That's really cutting it right down to the wire. I would like to have, and this is editorially speaking now, I would like to have a recommendation from BNF, so when Cliff and company go to the community forums, they can speak with some level of certainty of, here's what BNF has recommended. Now, we have wisdom that's limited to our own exposure here, but,
That's fair. We
okay.
could make a recommendation, and if something does come up, we could always, I know we
You
could
could,
revisit that.
yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you, sir. And thank you, Cliff. And it was also a veiled little plug for the,
Thank you.
well, I'll do it again. Thank you. I really don't have any other major questions because you've addressed through the past several months. So thanks for, listening to all the input and the feedback and the tough feedback that we've given you through the past several months. Appreciate that. I wish wish the pencil had gone the other way, but as Lynn said, it is what it is to a certain degree at this point. It's, I think it's all been covered. So thank you from my perspective. The one thing, I guess, just to editorial add, since I'm still talking, is the 320, the slight adjustment to our contingency plan. I believe the governing board is looking at reviewing those 3 items, as you had mentioned. So they may come out regardless.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Bosak?
Just a clarification, so you don't think we're being benign about this. This is the 3rd time we've heard this budget presentation, and we've thrown all the arrows and rocks at Cliff and his team the last 2 months, and they've responded flawlessly, coming back with a lot of information that this committee surfaced. So, again, please don't misunderstand our silence for being not caring. We've had many conversations and pushed the limit with that, and I think what we have today we've been a large part of, and congratulations to you and your team in putting a good budget together.
Mr. Bucknano, do you have a question?
No, I don't. It's a comment. It's a comment. It's not a
okay.
question. And it goes back to what I said earlier. In my opinion, it should not matter if a resident brings somebody from across the street in Grand or even from Portobello, but if the resident brings them to play golf in Sun City West and the resident is also on the tee sheet with that group, then those people should be treated like guests. And if someone calls on the phone and wants to get a tee time and a resident has nothing to do with it, then they should be treated like outside play. Thank you.
So just to get clarity on the process on this, because I'm not a golfer and I can't really respond to that. Frank, you are, so you might have a better idea. In the past, have we had a designated amount for a resident guest? As that's what you would call it. Your guest, and you're the resident and you're asking them to come in, as opposed to a public play.
To the best of my knowledge, the current fiscal year, this is something that was put in place for the fiscal year that we are in now. Prior to that, at least in my memory, we always had one rate, but we also had a lot lower rates back then. And so we instituted this 2-tiered system now, but now we're going back to the old rate.
Okay. So we've had this 2-tiered system. We've had the 2-tiered system that the proposal is to have one rate, and we've only had it for 1 year.
That's correct. Best of my knowledge, correct.
And it
Mr.
came
Bose-
from golf committee last year.
Yeah,
The two
I
rates.
understand that, and it's like they're turning they've evidently, and I'm just, this is a supposition, they've evidently rethought this. And they said, no, this is probably not what we want to do. I do value their opinion on that. So, Mr. Bosak?
Might be beneficial to have Pat put some context in this. I mean, he's the one that sat through the meetings and put the rates together and has the understanding of history, I think, can clarify.
Mr. O'Hara, would you be willing to come down and talk to us about that?
Absolutely.
Good morning, everyone. Pat O'Hara, Golf Operations Manager. Yes, Mr. Bagnano is correct. And as is Mr. Bozak, we put this in play last year for the first time where we separated public play and member guests. One of the reasons over this past year we had to separate the two because of tax implications. So this was one way in which kind of helped. But what we find, there's 2 thoughts on this. One, you're either a resident and you pay resident fees, or you're a non-resident. And so I believe the golf committee kind of took that tact, saying that you're either a resident with a rec number, paying resident rates, or you're not. And to be honest with you, from our standpoint, from an operations, this is a little bit easier for us, keeping it at 1. For those of you that have seen our rate sheet, it's a challenge, and it kind of confuses sometimes our staff. So this helps kind of solidifies it a little bit and makes it a little easier to understand if we have just a public or a guest rate. Does that help?
Yeah, I think it helps me. I'm not sure it answers Frank's concern, but we've kind of used this term outside play with impunity for years, and it really is not that. It's non-resident play.
Correct.
And non-resident play is defined as someone who's not a resident, simple as that. Now, there's about 60% of that comes from outside play, and about 40% of that is guest play. And it still winds up being about $2.2 million, so not something that we should sneeze at and we need to protect, but not at the expense of residents, obviously. And so the lottery availability, the rates are structured in such a way to benefit residents, and that's the way it should be. So just as a point of information, you've got those two pots coming at you from different places, and the outside players are very, very different than guests, and I understand your concern.
Pat, can you go into any more detail on why the golf course or the golf committee changed their mind? They did a turnabout on this.
There was comments made that kind of aligned with they're either a resident or they're not, regardless of who brings them, how they got here. They either are or they're not. And for $2, which is basically the dollar amount differential, let's just keep it simple and keep it all the same. So I see both sides. We would like to think that we treat everybody that comes into our golf shops as guests and residents. So there's not a difference in treatment. It's just a consolidating a price level is what it is.
But this is actually the recommendation from the golf committee is to unify that rate, to have one rate for resident guests and public.
Yeah,
so it's kind of a misnomer to say a resident guest.
Yes, it actually came out of a working group that the golf committee put together, and this is one of the things that they talked about.
Okay.
And then that in turn moved up to the golf committee.
Okay, Mr. Bagnato.
So then my question is, since outside players have to be charged sales tax, but resident guest players aren't going to be charged the sales tax,
That's the confusing.
It's going to be very confusing, and I've already had problems with starters charging my guests sales tax when they shouldn't have to. And so we're back to, okay, so they're going to pay the same amount for the greens fee, but one of them is going to pay sales tax and the other's not. And how are you going to fix that at the cash registers?
Yeah, that's been a challenge this last year with the two different rates. This now just becomes a tax or non-taxed item. So Frank Bagnato, when he plays, he's got his Coyote or Kachina card designation, and those players that are playing with Frank are member guests. So that is designated at the tee sheet. So we have our call center and other staff members go through there, and they comb the tee sheets in advance to make sure that everything looks right. Where we get into challenges is if Frank Bagnato brings 6 guests or 8 guests or whatever that might be, and not all of them are playing with a resident because they've mixed up the groups. That's where we run into challenges, and the starters have to ask questions and say, no, I'm a guest of Frank Bagnato's, therefore they don't have to pay tax. So there is still some challenges at the counter, but this will help simplify it from our standpoint.
Which will simplify it to unify the rate. Yeah.
Correct, to have one rate.
And it's going back to the way that we had done business prior to last year.
Yes.
And through a working group, the working group came up with a recommendation to standardize that rate.
And yes, that is correct.
Okay.
There is one detail that I think you'll agree with me that came out of that working group, was that the thought process was the benefit to a member guest is that they could get on the T sheet in that period that members are allowed only to book tee times. So they're already getting a benefit being a member guest by being able to do that. So that was one detail
That is correct.
that came out of that as well, so that they thought, well, they're already getting a benefit because they can get on the T sheet earlier. That's another piece of information. I will say the impact of this in the budget, if we took that $2 out, is about 50,000. So it's not a huge impact to the budget. So it would drop the 1,157,000 down to 1.
$50,000 is $50,000.
Yes.
That's a lot of money, Cliff.
Yes, it is.
No, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be flip about that, because
I don't either.
we all
I'm just letting you know what
understand.
the impact is.
We all
'cause
understand
That's what
that.
goes into my mind as a CFO.
Yeah, Christine?
And yes, I mean, I was highlighting and arguing over, I think, $5,000 items in our budget. So it is a lot, and I respect the fact we're joking a little, but we know that it's a lot. I can trust the fact that, first of all, our golf committee put a lot of time into it. Second of all these numbers have already been baked into the budget that we've seen, so that $50,000 impact has surely already been baked in. So I just wanted to remind all of us, right? I do respect everybody's opinions here on the committee, and we can always differ with any other committee. That's the whole point of having multiple committees. So whatever you wish to put forward as a recommendation, we should consider, Frank. From my perspective, professionally, just adding in, this is it's standard operating out there in corporate America, that you can try something new like we did this year and experiment with it and realize this did not yield the results that we wanted, therefore we're going to take a different tact. No one should bat an eye. As a matter of fact, I applaud us, the committee and so forth, for trying something and realizing not worth the cost and the confusion and so forth. So I have no problem with any of that. I just wanted to add in, first of all, this making a change and then realizing it didn't yield the results. That's not a bad thing. It means we learned something and we moved forward. That was really the key thing. And also just to assure us all that these numbers, the 50,000 or roughly 50,000 impact, is already baked in. Thanks.
So I'd like to go ahead and move it forward or not move it forward. So Frank, I'm going to defer to you if you wish to make that recommendation that we move it to the governing board. We will go through and ask for a second, and then we'll poll all of the committee members to see if they support it or they don't support it.
So if I make this recommendation, can I also include that we return to the two-tiered golf rate as part of the recommendation? In other words, I'm not comfortable recommending this as it stands.
No, and that your recommendation would be you return to the two-tier golf rate for public play and resident as it stood last year. That's the difference, as opposed to leaving it as it is in the proposed budget.
I'm pretty certain if I make the recommendation that it's not going to be supported by the committee, and so why would I make that recommendation? I don't want to waste everybody else's time here. I mean, I know it's not going to get supported by the committee.
It's your you have an intuitive feeling that far reaches.
Oh, I've been down this road many times, Dick.
I'm not going to say yes or no to this. I have to look to you, and you have to tell me if you want to move with this. Otherwise, we're going to let it go.
We haven't asked for resident commentary on this yet, have we? Should we?
We could. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, then that's in your hands.
Okay. Let's complete our discussion, though. Okay. So you'll have an opportunity to respond to this after we complete it. I think we're probably close to being done, is my guess. But Christine?
Just a sort of a procedure question. It might be easier for one of us to make the recommendation. Then we can ask for comments from ourselves and so forth. Does that make procedurally?
I think.
So I recommend, or the Budget and Finance Committee recommends, that we move forward to the governing board, that the governing board, we recommend, let me just start that again in English. I only had 1 cup of coffee. So the Budget and Finance Committee recommends that the governing board accept and approve the operating budget for fiscal year 24-25 as presented today.
And, okay.
So then with
So-
that, we have comments and
Yeah.
member comments and so.
Do we have any comments from the committee on that? Okay. Before we vote on it, I'd like to ask anyone in the audience if they wish to comment. If not, do we have anyone online? Okay, if not, we're going to poll the committee. And Mr. Bagnato, we're going to start with you, and this is for the entire budget.
Nay.
Hey, Dwayne,
I say we move forward as proposed.
be a yes?
Yes.
Yes?
Mr. Davis?
Yes, as approved.
Dr. Miller?
Yes.
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 Congratulations. We have completed the task that we started in February. And I think kudos have to go to Cliff and his staff, because we literally crucified them on some of these things and had them do a lot of work to help us understand exactly what we were getting into. And I want to echo Christine's comments, because I think that the budget that we have just recommended to go to the governing board is a very solid budget. You know, given the curve that has been thrown at us with the minimum wage issues, I'm really proud of the committee and the process that we've gone through. So thank you very much. And as a matter of record, the recommendation did pass 6-1. We have 2 agenda items left, and I want to make some comments before we begin. I want to remind everyone that they're going to be on a clock, that you have 15 minutes, and 15 minutes will, that our timers will keep that in mind, and that if you wish to speak, you'll have 2 minutes, but you'll have 1 opportunity, okay? And that includes anyone that's online as well. I want to maintain this to be a professional presentation, that we maintain decorum. I want to read, I have actually met and talked with both Mr. Plaster from the tennis club and Ms. Schaefer from Pickleball. And one of the things that I told them that we want to accomplish here is to focus on utilization, value, court demand, and current and future needs. Now, we got here in a kind of a roundabout way. It seems that there was a project that was put forth at kind of the last minute to resurface 16 tennis courts. Well, that seemed to be the catalyst for, well, what are we going to do with them? So, and the only thing I would say to that, because that's a relatively benign request, because we know that we want to resurface courts. We know that we want them to be safe, that we want to keep them up. So it wasn't a difficult decision at all to recommend approval for that. But evidently, this is so close to the surface, this whole issue of resource allocation and visionary, what's the visionary, what do we see for needs? This clearly is a financial issue, but I see it more as a visionary issue, an issue of resource allocation, or an issue of utilization of resources, of being good stewards with the resources that we have. So all of that's mixed in together. This is a bit unusual for us in budget and finance to be facing this, but we're willing to stand up to this and to be part of it. So at that, I'm very honored and pleased that we're going to have two presentations. One's going to be from Pickleball, and Mr. Ken Holtz is going to present that. And then the second will come from Mr. Plaster from the tennis club. And again, we appreciate both of you, the time and the effort that you've gone into preparing this. So, Mr. Holtz, if you would come up to the...
Dick, may I ask a question before we start,
Yes.
please? Just so I can put the presentations in the proper context for the Budget and Finance Committee. At the end of these presentations, what is it that you are asking the committee to do? Are these informational only presentations, or do we have a possible action?
I'm going to be very painfully honest with you that I struggled with that myself. What are we going to do with this? Because this process is out of sequence. The sequence would have been, that you start early in the year, you do, what do they call it, a CA13, and so there's a whole process. Much of that has been done, but it's either inactive or non-responded or whatever. And I really can't tell you, and I really don't know. And for our purposes here, I'm not interested in that. Because where we are today is that we have to make a determination of allocation of resources, make a recommendation of allocation of resources. Yes, Christine?
So I might be jumping in here, but I have to agree with David. I'm not sure what you're expecting us to do as an outcome. I believe, though, as a governing board member, I believe the idea is this is something for the future. Does anybody expect? I don't believe that that this is going to impact our capital or operating expense budget recommendations for 24-25. Is that your expectation?
That's my expectation.
This is a future consideration.
It's a future consideration.
Something that's an important one.
Future, and if you talk with the people that are looking at what are we going to do about the 16 courts, what color are we going to paint them? And quite simply, and how many stripes are we going to put on it? There has to be an issue. There has to be resolution on finishing that project, okay? So what I see for us is to have some sense of we're going to have to get some sense of clarity. And if we can come up with a recommendation of allocation of resources, if we can assign a dollar value specifically for these 16 courts. I know that the chairman of the Charter Clubs Committee is here, and in the spirit of a non-traditional process here, I'm going to ask him if you wish to come up and to address the meeting on that. This is Jack Leary. Jack Leary is currently the vice president of the governing board, and he's also the chairman of the Charter Clubs.
Thank you, Chairman Rhodes. I appreciate it. Budget and Finance Committee, as your chairman said, This process has gotten a little out of whack. Things got done in a non-procedural order. So the purpose of these presentations are to put things back into the proper sequence as best we can at this point. These presentations will be made to all the three primary committees, BNF, chartered clubs, and properties. Your goal is to look at this from a financial perspective. Now, the $160K that started this whole process out of sequence, you have already talked about that and settled on that. So my recommendation to you is that you continue to look at this from a financial perspective, needs versus wants, that from a financial perspective, if you hear something during these presentations that you think will cost us more money or save us more money, then certainly talk about that. But each of the other respective committees will look at it from the needs versus wants and not the financial perspective. So you are to look within your wheelhouse, if you will. So hopefully that'll give you some direction on what is expected.
And again, more of it's going forward basis, going into next year and forward.
Yeah. Yes. I mean,
Unless we hear something that we feel like we need to stop.
From a financial perspective,
Thank
that is
you.
correct. That is correct.
And I think the second part of that, Jack, is that this is an opportunity to hear from each one of to publicly hear from each one of the clubs what their current situation is, what their future needs are. And I think that's important that we publicly hear that.
And that's why I actually started this process, because it's been churning in the background for a long, long time. And the 160K became, as you said, Dick, the catalyst to start this process and talk about it now. And let's address this now, and hopefully we can come to a resolution. The three clubs will make their respective recommendations to the governing board. The governing board will then make a decision on that. So it's the opportunity for these two clubs to make their respective cases for resource allocation, and that's exactly what this is. We have limited resources, and when you have limited resources and you have competition for those resources, you work out something in order to allocate them equitably. So that's the goal here for the next 3 or 4 weeks, as each of the other two committees have hear the presentations.
And it even goes beyond clubs, although these are important presentations, but we all need to remember that tennis courts, pickleball courts, all our racket sports facilities are for the use and the pleasure of every owner, whether they're in the club or not.
That is correct. With the goal of our chartered club system, which from the beginning has been to offer a cost-effective method of delivering recreational amenities, for example. The control of those assets has been given to the stewardship, not the ownership, but to the stewardship of those respective clubs. But yes, they are also for our non-club cardholders who wish to use those assets.
Yeah,
Thank
Mr.
you,
Rose.
Dick.
Thank you,
Jack,
Jack.
before you leave the mic, as long as we have you, in the pickleball presentation, there's some urgency requested and some immediacy to the decisions. So just so we're clear, this is future expenditures, nothing in the immediate horizon.
This is, whatever immediacy is conveyed is in the perception of the presenters.
Okay.
Okay, so, yes, please. This is Ken Holtz from representing the Pickleball Club.
Okay. All right, my name is Ken Holtz. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. I'm very familiar with the background of the club. I've served as past president, VP, involved in all assets of the club for the last 11 years. Been an advisor to past presidents, all 5 of them. My specialty is understanding the resources of the club for utilization and the financial needs of the club long term. So, and first and foremost, our job as a club is simply to provide an environment for a robust and dynamic, enjoyable experience and an active lifestyle. And we don't decide where we play and when we play. It's just a matter of building that environment and presenting those needs to you. And we appreciate the support we've received. So we play where you tell us to play, and we appreciate it. Overall, questions have come up that we're looking for simply is we have a growing, exciting, dynamic activity in the community. It's not only happening, it's happening throughout the world, or United States especially. So we're looking for a plan. In other words, we're looking for a strategic plan in terms of how we're going to support the needs of what's going on currently and what's happening to us in the future. We'd like to know kind of where those options are so we can plan. We want to establish best options for you to look at that we can recommend. You just help in this decision. And hopefully ensure those decisions are very good for everyone involved in the entire community. This sport has gone crazy. We're not going to talk about it, but basically it's become big business, simply. And tennis is growing like crazy also. In other words, racket sports, as you mentioned before, it is just going crazy. 23.6 million tennis players, now 13.8 pickleball players. Lots of fun, lots of enjoyment, and lots of big business happening. Here in Sun City West, we're doing our part to grow that activity. This is just a chart from our beginning back when we were originally part of tennis, 2003, 4, and part of 5. About 20, just less than 20,000 activities or sign-ins were occurred as a member of the tennis club. And we were playing in R.H. Johnson. We didn't have any courts. We were sharing platform tennis courts at that time. Eventually, in 2005, we became a charter club and beginning to grow into what you see before you. The activity of growth is interesting for pickleball in that we've had to prove our ability to have space. Now, we started with no courts. We were given 3. We were given then 13. Then we were given up to 21. And now we're at 26 for the last 6 years. Each time we've been given that space, we've filled that space. We've had monumental gains in our membership. As you can see on the chart, 38% when we had an expansion, 22%, 15%, and so on. And we're living a dream. In other words, it's an activity that is just like a bull in a china shop in terms of managing. This translates from membership into activity. And then the same percentages of growth in the first full year after having space to move into, leaping forward with activity of 40%, 31%, and 20%. So the key is what's happening now and then what's going to happen in the future, because with all of the growth that's occurring in this industry, we are looking at a very favorable wave of activity coming at us ongoing for quite a time. Then the question is, well, where are we going to put them? So these are just projections for you that we provided to rec management and for you to look at to understand what's happening and to make good decisions moving forward. High season. The only reason I bring up high season is that's the period of the time when our community has to work. In other words, the most available people to use all of the facilities that you have. That's when your satisfaction comes back. In other words, can I get a tee time to play golf? Can I get a bocce court to play bocce or whatever? So we need to focus on, it's kind of our rush hour, if you will. And if I can't get to work on time, then I got to fix something, or I got to build a roadway or a lane to get there. The blue area there is simply Palm Ridge. It's one of our facilities with 18 courts. Our other facility is the green area, which is R.H. Johnson Sands. And there's a sliver up there you can't see, and that's the Coons facility. But basically, it was a test that we tried to do, but the current surface conditions just don't allow for pickleball to be played at either a safe level or an adequate level, meaning that the ball doesn't want to bounce. It needs to be redone. But it's all growing. It's growing very rapidly. And it's also important to understand how all these numbers come in. In other words, Palm Ridge, called Liberty, is provided by Club Track, which is our wonderful system that provides us excellent data. And then also by activity reports for people that don't have access to Club Track, basically non-club members, and also a guest or a non-resident guest. So there's all these different factions that use the old system of activity reports, and those two then are combined to find out what the activity in that facility is. The other facility, R.S. Johnson, doesn't have Club Track. It's an open access facility where we use activity reports, the paper system. But I'm going to these slides don't worry about all the numbers and everything, but basically the key is balance of play. In other words, our job is managing the facilities and scheduling activities, because we have over 50 different club programs that happen weekly, is to sell empty seats on the airplane, basically. So this is for us to use to manage where our play is in the AM hours, which are 7 to noon, the afternoon from noon to 5, and our PM hours of 5 to 9, a 14-hour day. We're open for 15 hours, but at Palm Ridge, where Club Track, and these are all Club Track numbers, we've been instructed not to start any of our pickleball club priority or programs until 8 o'clock in the morning. And what this tells you is that we've got a great balance AM and afternoons, and we're developing the evening hours. If we all had to go to work for the living, we'd be having more evening hours. But our community is typically, if you drive around this place at night, you don't see much going on. You'll see the lights on the pickleball, you see the bowling alley busy, and a few people having a few beers here and there. So that's just January and February. The key is then the only reason I put this slide up there is we're able to, because of Club Track, we are able to take an actual time of when people check in and put it in a silo of a window. So 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, and able to track activity based upon the uses of courts. This is important to us because then it tells us, excuse me, trying to dry up here. It tells us that when another group comes in, a group of 16 players that want space to play 3 times a week and they need, let's say, 8 courts, we go to these tools that we have to look at the AM hours, the PM hours. Thank you. To establish where those opportunities lie. This is just a health assessment. In other words, however you want to look at activity in pickleball, last 10 years since the beginning, pre-COVID to now, on a member basis or on a unique user basis, our scorecard or our health assessment is actually very good. This tool was provided to rec management about a year and a half ago. So in other words, we're 2 years in on a 10-year plan. And we basically brought forward based on the activity with assumptions of different levels of growth, whether it's 3%, 5%, 7%, 10%, based upon historical needs and then current trends. So for example, a year and a half of this plan has already been completed. In the first phase, we grew 15% from 22 to 23, from 23 to 24, which is just high season right now. We're growing at about 7.5 to 15% for high season, which will work out to be about a 7.5% growth rate for this year. So going forward, we're really looking at about a 4 to 5.5% growth rate because eventually we're going to flatten out. In other words, there's only 30,000 residents here, about 17,000 home rooftops. And so our penetration level can only reach a certain amount before it starts to just hover and then grow a little bit. And out of the 1,100 to 1,300 homes sold each year, we only have so many potential of new users coming in to enjoy the sport of pickleball. Let's get into probably what you're most interested in, and that is what are the options. And just to, rather than try to deal with what's on this slide, there's really two locations that have the potential for expansion, for investment in space. And that's let's talk about Kuntz first, and then talk about R.H. Johnson. Kuntz is a wonderful opportunity. You can put 18 pickleball courts in there with a nice gathering space, have all the amenities to support a world-class pickleball facility like you do at Palm Ridge, for example. It's a very similar footprint that was at Palm Ridge. So you can envision what you see at Palm Ridge happening at Kuntz. And what's nice about Kuntz is it's below grade. Below grade has immense advantages from wind reduction, consolidation and containment of noise, because we do make noise, and we'll talk about that. But also, by putting pickleball there, which is an option, comes activity. In other words, if you put 18 courts of pickleball, eventually you'll be delivering approximately the same amount of activity you have at Palm Ridge. That's 60,000 sign-ins a year. High season, half of that, 30,000. Okay, so that leads to parking spots and amenities that you want to have around it in terms of, I talk with my hands too much, bathroom facilities and things. And so it's important that you evaluate all of that, and that's why we have the different committees involved in this decision to look at what's the best option. And I know that Kuntz, because it has been been sitting idle kind of for many years now, and you want to do something with that, and there's money in the budget to do something with that. I think in the tune of $700 to maybe inflation adjusted to $900,000. You then want to look at that in terms of what would it cost to do that project and do it the right way, because that's the only way we do things in Sun City West. The preliminary numbers on doing it the right way are probably 1.8 to 2.5 million. And that's wonderful. If that's appropriate, accomplishes the job, takes into consideration the Kuntz facility, the ingress, the egress, and all the things that go into that decision, okay? And our job is simply to say, we'd be fortunate to be there. Tenants would probably support that decision, but it's your decision, it's not ours. We're just here talking about it, sharing information, our perspective. The R.H. Johnson, and the other limiting factor potentially is how much are we going to be allowed to grow? Because 18 courts is shy of the overall projected need. And then the question is, well, where would the further need be developed? What is left for development, if possible? Okay. R.H. Johnson simply is, there's space there. It currently is being occupied by a fellow activity. We respect them. All we're saying is it's a very low-cost option for us. In other words, we could be in there in 30 days. We're not changing anything but color and lines. It would offer the 14 to 16 courts we need for immediate relief, and it provides 27 courts for long-term. Short-term, it costs you under $50,000. Long-term, it's under $400,000 or $500,000. And it doesn't have to be done now. In other words, it's planned. It gives you 6, 7, 8 years to plan this and spend that kind of money. To conclude, losing my voice. Conclude basically is, and pickleball's always supported you. In other words, policies have changed in terms of how that support can be made. But I mean, we've invested just under $500,000 in this association for the support we've received for the R.H. Johnson facility and numerous other things. So, and we are willing to partner up to the point that we are allowed to, put it that way, financially, if that's what's needed. Because we have funds, we need space, we want to do what's best. You tell us where it is and let us know how much we can provide, and then see if we can provide that.
Thank you very much. Before you go to, does the committee have any specific questions? Dr. Miller?
Okay, so your president in the past has stood up in front of this committee and said that the Kuntz facility is unacceptable. Has that now changed?
May I answer that?
Sure.
Okay. The Kuntz facility in discussion was looked at in terms of our total need. In other words, if Kuntz was all we can get, and that's all we're ever going to get, of course we would want to be there. But if we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to present to you and for you to allow the discussion on what is the financial investment need to accomplish the long-term goal. And we're telling you that's in addition, getting to approximately 52 to 55 courts of pickleball in this community in the next 10 years. You can't do that with Kuntz. And
I understand, but it's a step in the direction. The reason I asked the question is because I spent an hour looking on Google Maps last night, looking at the footprint of Sun City West, trying to determine where additional courts could go in the future. And we have very limited options. I mean, basically, it's parking lots at this point in time. There's really not a lot of opportunity for a virgin footprint which we own the property where we could put something else. So, you know, again, looking at Kuntz certainly would be a viable option. I mean, I always feel uncomfortable when one club impacts the activities of another club.
Understand that.
And, and so trying to figure out how to make everybody happy isn't necessarily the Budget and Finance Committee's job, because nobody who does Budget and Finance ever makes everybody happy. Right? So anyway, okay, so if you've answered the question, yes, you would be willing to go to Kuntz.
As long as there's a long-term plan, coupled with that. In other words, to say it's like a contingency plan of what we were just talking about before on the budget, that if we see the future, how do we get there? And yes, we have to prove ourselves to get there, but what is the plan?
Okay, Ms. Kellis?
Yes, it sounds like you believe there's a substantial cost going to Kuntz and changing those to to pickleball courts. Can you expand on that?
The cost factor will probably determine more with the amount of parking needed. In other words, if you decide, and basically in discussions we've had with rec management in terms of parking, because we've gone through many of these discussions to say, what if we expanded it at Palm Ridge? Well, and the impact of that on parking and egress and ingress. So Kuntz is very similar that way, meaning that it's a busy place. We added new parking there a couple of years back, and it's filling up pretty quick. And especially the times of day you have to drive around to find parking, because there's wonderful activities there that are busy. So all we're saying is it would be a wonderful facility, but it has to be done the right way, and the right way happens to spend some money.
Thank you.
Mr. Bernardo?
I've heard chatter that you guys would like to play in the shade, and so perhaps what we need is some pickleball courts on the ground, and let's put a parking structure on top of them. I'm so glad I have no dog in this fight, and so whichever way this goes, I'm happy to just be done with it. But the question that I have is that if new facilities were built and those facilities were allocated strictly to pickleball club members, would the pickleball club be willing to pay for the cost of the new facilities?
I'm not sure that's a question that we would, well, you can, you can tell us.
I'm comfortable. Okay. Basically, the policies have changed. In other words, the policies of 2010 to 2013 basically said that when expansion of facilities were required, a club would be expected to participate up to their ability to help that along financially. Okay, that was initiated under Mike Whiting's regime. It was discussed when a bill was here. It was brought through a variety of committees that were worked on for the nonprofit status of clubs and what they're allowed and can't do. And a new policy was then written, because basically it was a carrot and stick approach, meaning that we'll put this out there and then we'll let you raise money. Well, that raising of money got in the way of the rules and regulations of your nonprofit status. While it was effective, though, the R.H. Johnson Sands courts of $360-some thousand, we were responsible for $333,500 of that, and we delivered on that.
It's fine, but that's now, done, that's finished. Going forward, so if I understand you correctly, current policies, and I know it has to do with the IRS, would not allow the club to contribute to the cost or even pay the entire cost?
No,
Is that correct?
No, the IRS doesn't care about whether we contribute. The question is how we get the funds to contribute. But for example, we partner on things all the time. In other words, if we need to get some furniture and we need to come up with 20, 30 grand to do so, and we knowing that it then becomes your property, and when it's 8 years later, when it needs to be replaced, you're replacing it. So those things are happening moving forward. As we move into any new facility, one of the key things you want to think about is the foundational surface that you invest in, that post-tension concrete. That's the biggie. That's where virtually all of the big dollars are spent. But as mentioned before, it has a long lifespan. It's worth 40 to 60 years of value for you. So that means you have to think past the next 10 years of use. You want to know what changes are going to happen to that surface, who's going to be playing what sport on it, and you want to make the surface not unchangeable. In other words, so that, for example, wherever new court space we go on, we're going to be using the high-end portable nets, so we're not drilling any holes anymore. We're not putting fences in and things that would have to be bore out and then potentially screw up your investment of the post-tension concrete.
Director Novello. Director Novello.
Earlier, we were, before I say anything at all, it bears repeating just for transparency purposes. I play pickleball, and I'm a member of the pickleball club. That does not color my opinions in my view, but I just wanted to be fully transparent as a member of the committee and as a member of the governing board, so just FYI. Now, that being said, just want us to go back earlier this morning, just a scarce hour or two ago. We got an update on our irrigation project, right? You can see that there's a 5 to 6 year plan that that Todd and his team have put together that we can look forward and see over a period of time. Granted, those are very large financial investments, but that's the scope of this committee. We should be looking at, we are concerned primarily, not with the activities, but what does this do to us financially? I think what we're looking at, if I may, right, this is something that really bears a strategic or a visionary type of view. We, Sun City West, we see ourselves, and we know we were founded as a golf community, so we're making those investments, and we should. We have a nice 5 year or so view, so we can see going forward. So, so this presentation is helpful in terms of showing that the Kuntz facility, for example, will need more renovation, but that's a facility that has been neglected for some period of time, and we know that it's going to need renovation no matter what we do. So just FYI, for whatever we're going to do, goes all the way back. I'm a broken record on this point, but we as a community do require some kind of strategic vision. We do require from the governing board to have some key initiatives. What else is important to us beyond golf over the coming 5 to 10 years? I think we need that in order to settle some of these investment decisions as a budget and finance committee. Doesn't mean that we're not going to talk about them here. I'm just giving my opinion. So thank you for laying out that there's it looks like on the surface, a really, really big dollar value if we wanted to renovate Kuntz for any purpose, but we knew that. That's the reason why there is a project in the budget proposed to study what the options would be. So just wanted to make some commentary. I don't know if I missed anything there, but I do think we need to make as a community some kind of a going forward, what are we going to do with our scarce resources for racket sports? Yes.
This isn't the first time we've stood in front of these committees and the governing board. The last time was March of 21, and just basically coming out of COVID, and we were at the point of the same thing. And that time it was the Kuntz facility for consideration at probably $1.7 million to accomplish that, or a little bit less. But it was delayed and put off for similar reasons. It was, we don't have numbers. We didn't know if people were coming back. We were coming out of COVID. And then the governing board basically said, well, we need a master plan survey to be conducted. That survey was conducted. It was published. Pickleball scored amazingly well. Number 3 overall need in the community was space for pickleball. It's 2 years later. We're still with 26 courts from 6 years ago when the Space Utilization Committee, 2018, recommended 16 courts be built within 2 years. So we've been waiting a long time. We haven't been quiet in more ways than one. But in other words, we're looking for feedback. We're the club. You guys make the calls. You guys make the decision. Thank you.
And I think that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to move this along, and it's in kind of a disjointed way. So if we don't have any other questions from the committee, Frank has one more, okay? Dwayne Parsons.
Sorry. Did I understand you, Ken, saying in the next 10 years you project 50 more are needed? 50
No,
more
a total of between probably 52 to 60 courts. And then you also got to realize that you can only provide what you can. In other words, and it has to be proven along the way that we need them.
Right.
This isn't an empty, an unending thing, because we're going to tap out at some point because of the number of homes we have available. But our penetration levels today versus what's happening in the community and the rest of the United States in certain areas is very doable with a growth of 4 to 5%. So we have immediate needs because we're about 4 years behind what we thought would happen in terms of space. So we need, I would say, 12 to 14 courts as soon as possible. 16 would be ideal because basically that gives us breathing room and growing room for the next 2 to 3 years, and also thinking time and planning time for what the next step is. But we should have a vision of what the next step is so that when we can prove it along the way, we can step into that with the right amount of money.
So my question was going to lead to, on your expansion options chart here, you've got 18 courts are possible at Kuntz, and then possibly another up to 27 at RH.
Well, no,
Is there
20, we have 26 today. We only need to get to 52 to 60. So that's an addition of 27 to 30 courts from now. We will potentially need 27, 26, and the minimum to total of 30 courts, probably, or 35 in the maximum. Depends on growth.
So Kuntz doesn't sound like it is going to get you to the right numbers.
Solution.
But would RH get you to the right number versus Kuntz?
RH, basically, the plan, if we were recommending, in other words, we feel comfortable participating with tennis, and it's being done in a lot of places across the country. But once again, they may not be comfortable with us participating alongside them. There's commingled facilities, there's together but separate facilities, and then there's separate facilities. Right now, we're separate facilities. We're okay with any of those, but we also have to respect the needs of tennis.
Right.
That's going into your consideration too. But space-wise, if we were in the R.H. Johnson complex with pickleball, we would be planning to put 27 courts there someday, pickleball courts. And the first step of that is the 14 to 16. And the same amount of space is then utilized for the full amount. In other words, it doesn't grow. It doesn't grow in space.
I'm just trying to understand, are you going to eventually need both of these options, RH and Kuntz, or is it?
27 additional courts at R.H. Johnson plus the 26 today puts us within the lower tertile of need of an objective. A very good one, though. And it's easy to project the next 5 years. Projecting 5 years plus is the hard part.
Okay.
Because we see a tsunami happening, but eventually it's got to have to settle down.
Okay, I think our last question is going to be from Mr. Bagnetto.
It's actually a pretty simple one. In terms of the total number of courts in our community, how do we rank vis-a-vis other communities throughout the valley? Do other communities have more courses than we have, less courses? Where are we?
Every community is a little different because they are also different in terms of build out or availability and budget available and those types of things. Off the top of my head, I can talk Pebble Creek. Pebble Creek is a facility that tennis shares friends with and shares tennis experiences with. It's a community that we share pickleball experiences with. I'm running off the top of my head now, but they're probably around 5,500 population. They've had build-out opportunities for, I think, 7,000 rooftops. And they've got 22, I'm working off my head now. They have a total of 36 pickleball courts with 16 that were just built and are not open yet to provide for that. So their penetration level is much higher than ours. In other words, 20% of their population has access and is using pickleball. We're in the 7% range.
So their population is less, so the per capita.
And they're also younger. In other words, they're 45 plus community. They're, I think their median age is around 63. We're like 74. So that factors into it too.
As well
but
as
but they have, I think it's 13 or 14 tennis courts, and today they have 36 pickleball courts. But that's also for potential build-out purposes, because I'm sure they're going to be running out of room eventually too.
Okay, thank you. We've been in 2 hours right now. So we're going to take a bio break, okay? 5 minutes, and come back and we will resume. We're going to resume the meeting. We're going to have an opportunity for those in the room here to comment or to ask questions after we have the presentation from tennis. And you'll be able to make a comment on either pickleball or tennis, either one. So we haven't lost that. Don't worry about that. This would be Mr. Larry Plaster. And Larry is the president of the tennis club. So at that, Mr. Plaster, we turn the podium over to you.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Rhodes. Really appreciate the chance to present our position here. I think what you'll find that I have to say is really pretty simple. It'll boil down to just a couple of decision points. But I think there is an immediate decision, in addition to approval of the $160,000 to resurface the courts, which you already agreed with, and that'll happen. But how we resurface them has a major impact on the future of the community. And the recommendation was to resurface them as tennis. If that changes, there is an immediate impact. So to start with, we found out not too long ago that Pickleball had been working on a proposal to convert, at that time, 6 of our tennis courts to pickleball courts, and had gotten some traction for presentation of that plan in the $50,000 study that was to be done for the future. Once we found out about it, we had very little reaction time to do anything because we didn't know it was coming. But we've done the best we can to put something together, and hopefully this is accurate. You're going to find a few of my numbers are not accurate with what Ken presented, because from the last thing that we saw, Carl shared a little bit of what they had been presented to him. The numbers have changed since I saw it, and I had nothing else to go by. One of our main points is that the decision to basically destroy our tennis center and put pickleball courts at the tennis center is not justified right now. Pickleball, they have very large numbers, and at peak times they have very large usage rates. But some of what they present is a little bit misleading. Pickleball, based on usage rates, percent sign-ins, pickleball is very different from tennis. A lot of people play pickleball and they'll go play 2 or 3 games, they'll play for an hour and they'll leave. Tennis is much longer, most of the time an hour and a half minimum, often more than 2 hours. So we don't get as many sign-ins as they do, but we still get a very high level of usage of our courts. And then sign-in, log-in percentages also include things other than play, like club meetings and that sort of thing. So do our numbers, but their numbers are much larger when you talk about club meetings. So we believe that the status today of pickleball is that they are not fully utilizing all of their courts to an extent that would justify basically eliminating most of tennis at R.H. Johnson. When you look at some of their charts, and one of them, especially the chart that shows that they are using more than 100% of court availability, that's based on Liberty only on Palm Ridge. Does not include Sands, and if you calculate the hours available including Sands, they're not even close to total availability. They're running out at Liberty at times, they run out at Sands at times, but it's more of a usage management problem than being totally out of courts at this point. Sort of an underlying assumption here, well, I went way too far. An underlying assumption is that tennis doesn't need their courts, that tennis is declining in participation, and it's okay to take half of our courts and we can live with what's left. Our data would say that that's not true. This is current month usage rates, and I show that just to show that since we've been able to get accurate data out of Club Track and other sources, we track it very closely, and we know what the usage rates are. And we're running now about 20,000 logins per year. And that's in 2022. We're running ahead of that number in 2023. And more importantly, we're about 65% of our club is participating, a very high participation rate. I haven't seen numbers for the pickleball club, but I suspect they're much lower than that. They've got a lot of members, but there are a lot that don't play regularly. This is, I wish I'd been able to get a screenshot of this from last week, because we're already beginning to lose players, but this is this Wednesday's court reservations. The courts are all full, basically from 8 till noon. That's typical of the high season. Almost every day we are using all of the courts in the mornings. Now, yeah, old people tend to play in the mornings, not just because of the heat. Yeah, certainly in the middle of the winter we could play in the middle of the day, but we have 76 members that are over 80 years old and into 90. Our average age is about 70, so most of us are higher energy and more focused from 8 till noon than afternoon. So the older people just want to play in the mornings. That's true of pickleball as well. That's one reason they have some congestion. But the notion that tennis is declining and that we don't need our courts, this is from going back to 2011. Now, I showed this because Mr. Leary insisted that for 2023 I show Club Track data only. We only have Club Track data from 2021 on. The rest of it is the total logins. But we had in 2017, 2016, when the new courts were built, we were running about 20,000 logins a year. We're still running, this shows out of Club Track, 18,676 for 23. It's actually, if we include all the other sign-ins, over 19,660. So my point is, we're about the same as we've been for the last 20 years. We're running just about the same court usage. So we're not declining. The second part of this slide, Ken made the point for me, so I don't have to say it. Tennis is growing. Pickleball is growing. Tennis is growing. We're likely to maintain our level of play for many years to come. There's a lot of younger people getting into tennis these days. When those people retire, they'll come here. They'll do the same thing for pickleball to a point. One of the biggest issues with the decision now, if it had to be made now, to put pickleball at R.H. Johnson, is that there are a lot of other problems. Tennis is a relatively quiet sport, other than a few of the pro players that scream every time they hit the ball. Generally, we don't do that. So it takes concentration. The points are pretty long, and they're relatively quiet. Pickleball is loud. Hitting the ball is loud. And the level of play, there's a lot more chatter when you play. I play pickleball. I'm a member of the pickleball club. I enjoy playing, but it's a very different game, and no matter how you get around it, it's really loud. And you put that next to a tennis court, it does not work well. And we addressed this in 2016. We actually put together a number of working groups. We did a whole bunch of studies. I mean, this is the book of what all of the studies and things that we did in 2015 and 2016 that resulted in separation of tennis and pickleball, with a conclusion that it doesn't work well together. I know Ken says there's facilities around the country where they're putting it together. Even USTA guidance says as a first choice, you separate it. Second choice, you put it together, but not on the same courts. And they only recommend putting pickleball and tennis on the same court with dual lines in small facilities where there's only 1 or 2 courts. So they recognize that it does not work well together. And we would contend that right now we don't need to do that. There's other issues with R.H. Johnson, but historically, if we're going to make a decision to go back on what was decided in 2016, we need to do the same sort of study that we did at that time. There just seems to be an assumption in what pickleball presents that tennis doesn't need more than 8 courts. I don't know where that comes from. We use them all today, but it would have a drastic effect on our ability to continue what we do as a tennis club if we're cut down to 8 courts. Our tournament, and I know pickleball's tournament raises a lot of money for charity. We're not as big, we don't raise as much. We still raised $8,000, $4,000 for Pride, $4,000 for the Posse from our tournaments this year. You can't conduct a tournament with 8 courts. That would just be done. Our major events we have 4-team tennis events here. We have reciprocal play here. Those events all use every court, and some of them for a couple of days. Those would all be done. It would force, right now, all of our levels and age groups play mostly in the morning. If we go down to 8 courts, it would force us to start people playing at noon or after. Now, we've got space, we can do that, but a great part of the year, it's too hot, especially for tennis. Tennis is takes more running, more strenuous than playing pickleball. It's easier to play pickleball in the heat than it is to play tennis for several reasons. Not only more running, but pickleball is a short game. You play for 20 minutes and then you usually rotate out. Tennis, you're out there for an hour and a half, at least, and often 2 hours, as I said. You'll see numbers in here about 6 courts. That's because the proposal that they put together changed from the time that we saw what was presented to Carl to what they're presenting today. So those numbers are not right. It should be 8 courts. The bottom line is we just won't exist as a viable club activity for tennis if we're cut to 8 courts. Most of what we do, we just won't be able to do. There's other problems. Where they're proposing to put these courts is right next to the dog parks. The large one on one side, the small one on the other. Dogs don't like pickleball noise. Just like gunshots, some dogs, gunshots don't bother, and some they're terrified. It wouldn't terrify all of them, but it's not going to be good to put that much noise right next to those dog parks, and the dog park people will not be happy with that. It's also very close to one of our golf courses, closer than any of our other pickleball facilities. You're going to get issues with the houses there as you do anywhere. That's not going to change. But if we look at growth of pickleball at Coons, the noise impact is far less because the entire facility is recessed. We addressed all this in 2016 and made the decision to not put pickleball at R.H. Johnson. We shouldn't go back on that today. We just feel like the pickleball cannot support a valid case for needing immediately more pickleball courts right now. They have more court space. We have a member that comes in and out of the facility every day and is taking pictures of sands. I can produce over 50 pictures of sands all in the morning, all during peak time, where there's empty courts every day. So they've got courts. They need to reallocate them. Will they need more courts in the future? Absolutely. They're still growing. So the other issue with the urgency, Ken showed charts, and he spent hundreds of hours putting those together. Very impressive. But they show this 4.5 to 5.6% growth out to 15 years in the future. But he says, and it's true, that has to level off somewhere. There's only so many houses and so many people. I would contend if you look at the trends in the recent years, their usage rates are leveling out, not going up as fast. Their membership is not growing as fast. They went from over 1,908 members last year to down to 1,700. They're back to 1,800 and something. But they're already potentially seeing some leveling out. So in conclusion, we could put together a good plan, work together to get them more courts at the Coons facility, and it would satisfy their needs for quite some time, maybe forever. If we go with their plan today to take our tennis courts, tennis is done here, basically. Okay, thank you, Dick.
Thank you very much. I'm going to make some comments I'm not sure are going to be very popular. I've listened, and these are my comments. These are not the comments of the committee, by the way. I've listened to two presentations today, and I don't think I got a whole lot out of either one of them. Because what we're looking for, what we're trying to do, is to look at resource allocation. What are our needs? Are we best utilizing our courts? You know, I heard a lot of things about, that empty courts and pictures and, and to me, that doesn't mean a whole lot. Sorry. I really feel like I'm back to square one. I appreciate the passion, Larry. I appreciate your passion on this. And Coke and your staff, I appreciate your passion. And I understand, that you're anxious and you want to do this. But I think from a perspective of being a visionary to try to predict what our future is, I'm not really interested in what's happened in the past. We know that what's happened was not the right thing. We didn't make the progress that we wanted to make. But we're in a position right now, and thank goodness that we had this catalyst of $160,000 resurfacing that brought this back to the surface again. When I first saw that, I wanted just to kind of roll my eyes and say, oh my gosh, we're at it all over again. We are at it all over again, but I think we have to be serious about this. And we have to be introspective, and we have to look at, how many real people use this? What are we maximizing the allocation of our courts right now? I heard innuendos from Pickleball, and I didn't hear a lot of statement from tennis. That you're maximizing your courts. The check-ins, maybe that might be true, but if you have 16 courts, what's the maximum number that you could accommodate? Not what you actually did. So I don't know what to think. I can tell you, I think that Christine has had an excellent idea of let's look at this thing from a long-range planning perspective. I think that's the answer, but that's my perspective. So at that, take it for what it's worth. I'm going to pass this over to the committee, and I'm going to let them ask you questions, Larry. Okay? And I think that Ms. Kellis has been the one that wants to ask the first. So go ahead, Lynn Kellis.
Thank you, Dick. Larry, I have a couple of questions. First off, with your participation here, I am assuming that these are all tennis and not inclusive of any of the other, like racquetball or table tennis, any of that. These are numbers just from your tennis team.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and the only other one we have is table tennis. Racquetball is not a part of our club.
Okay, so table tennis is not included.
It's not included.
Okay. And I'm wondering what kind of impact it would be to you if you did forfeit 6 of the courts to pickleball, with keeping in mind, and I'll explain my reasoning there, that you keep the Kuntz tennis courts as is. My thought is, it seems to me like a quick fix with spending a lot less money up front, which is what we're looking for right now with this looming possibility of $18 minimum wage coming in. If you were able to give up 6 courts for pickleball, and they could do those for a relatively cheap cost moving in there, and then if we looked at Kuntz and it was to remain as it is, tennis courts, and just do the resurface on them in case you had overflow, what kind of impact would that have on you as the tennis club?
Well, Kuntz has to be redone, whether it's done for tennis or pickleball. That surface is not acceptable. So the cost there, you don't save much money either way you go. But the impact on tennis, our major events, like our tournament and our team tennis, the major events where we use all of our courts, do not work at 2 different facilities. We play and we change courts locally. You can't drive back and forth. So it would eliminate most of our major events. It would allow our players to play, but you're still going to have to spend the money to completely redo Kuntz. It's unplayable the way it is now.
I agree with you. Either way, it needs to have some attention to it. However, my understanding is to be able to put pickleball courts there, we can't really do that without enhancing parking, and now we're looking at, another major redo. So the biggest limitation for you is that you would have to travel, which is, I assume, what pickleball would have to be doing too if they needed the extra courts. But do you see it impacting your players in any way?
Well, other than not being able to do the things that we normally do, our groups we could put groups at Kuntz and at Orange Johnson. But impact, if you put, and they're not talking about 6 now, they're talking about 8 courts at Orange Johnson. If you put 8 pickleball courts at Orange Johnson, you've got 8 people on a court as opposed to 4 today, it's going to have an impact to parking no matter where you do it. It's not like Orange Johnson, and its parking lot is half empty. It's full most of the time. So, yeah, maybe you have to spend a little more to put parking at Kuntz to put pickleball there, and maybe you don't. You might be able to get by with what you have for a while.
Thank you.
Mr. Bosak?
Larry, quickly, how many days a year are your major events? What's the sum of the number of days that are dedicated to major events?
Yeah, our team tennis, we have 4 of those a year. One every quarter, and then our SIS tournament is 4 days in the spring.
And how many days for those quarterly events? How many days does it take to conduct it?
It's just 1 day.
Oh, 1 day. So you got a total of 8 days for the year?
Yeah.
Mr. Bagnato?
The one thing that I didn't hear from tennis is we want more, we want more, we want more. And that's kind of refreshing because that would only make this problem even worse. What I am hearing is that tennis would just like to be left alone, and I'm kind of in agreement with that. If I had my way, I'd solve the problem by just giving the pickleball club the Kuntz facility and let's call it a day. Big picture from me is that perhaps we need to start learning to live with what we have and enjoying what we have instead of constantly asking for more, more, more. That being said, I'm glad I have no dog in this fight.
Director Novello?
we all have dogs in the fight in a way, because we're all residents and we're the Budget and Finance Committee for the entire residency, whether we play tennis, pickleball, or whatever. This is our future. So thanks for taking the time to come here. I just want to make sure I understood your perspective on behalf of tennis players, not just the club, but about shared facilities. Again, I know my personal experience and my own research. I just wanted to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly. Pickleball, and right now, pickleball and tennis, all of our facilities are in high demand, right? Let's put it that way. We heard that from the last presenter as well. What's your take on, not long-term, but short-term, tennis and pickleball sharing some courts? Is that something that you think, I think I heard you say that that's just not going to work for tennis players in general. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, that's been our experience. That was our experience in 2014 and 15 when pickleball started at R.H. Johnson. There were constant complaints, arguments, fist fights over, literally, over inconsiderate, noise and interruptions. So it's our opinion that that will never work well. And it's my experience, and having done it at other places, that I've not seen anywhere where that works well.
And I did want to thank you for that.
Excuse me. I think we have a distraction. So if you would please stop. Excuse me. This is what we don't want. We need to have this to be a professional, respectful presentation. Okay? Okay, I'm sorry, Director Novello?
Thank you. I'm going to point something out that's both in your presentation and I believe in the presentation before. I just didn't have the chance to ask, but the usage numbers that you were showing don't seem to agree with our usage numbers from Club Track. Can you update that for any future presentations, please?
Well, like I said, you only have Club Track since 2021. So
I'm saying your current year, 2023, does not sync with what we've seen come out of Club Track. So if you could please.
It is the Club Track number for 2023. I got that from Jack.
If I'm incorrect, I stand corrected, but there seems to be some discrepancy in both presentations, to be fair. I don't mean to just be picking on you. Could you please go back and take a look at that? We need to make, it's so hard, as Director Rhodes was saying. I don't enjoy, and none of us enjoy being in the position of having to make some kind of settle a fight or so forth, because we're all neighbors and friends. These are both great sports. We're an active community, and we want to promote our entire community. So it's not a matter of siding with one club or another. We really need to look at the future. I do believe very strongly that we need a multi-year plan here, because we're not a community that has, although we have a very healthy reserves, we have not planned to spend many, many millions of dollars in any one given year on either sport. So we need to look forward and say, how are we going to grow all of our facilities and maintain them going forward, right? So I do advocate more for that. And I just wanted to make sure that I understood, usage numbers didn't seem to agree. If you could take a look at those for us, that would be helpful. And the same goes for the pickleball presentation as well. The other item, since we do need to look at the data, the financial data, is that whole, the impact going forward. We're looking at a potential safety issue, from what I understand, in the current courts. I think right now what we need to also look at is that the tennis community doesn't really see an opportunity to near-term share those courts, even if we were to restripe them as a part of that, restripe some of those as shared facilities. That's not going to work either, if I heard you correctly. So it's a matter of determining what to do for the near-term safety issue and then deciding what we want to do longer-term, in my view.
Yeah. Well, as a long-term plan, We need to resurface the courts now. There's no question about that. There's not a need right now to provide courts at R.H. Johnson for pickleball. And then we need a plan. If we make Kuntz work, that would be great. And if we have to go to R.H. Johnson after that, then we go do that. It really is not a lot more money if we make the decision later to just restripe courts at R.H. Johnson. You don't have to resurface them, paint over the lines and paint new lines on it. So that decision can be made after we've spent the time to have that solid future plan in place.
Yes, Director O'Leary?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to reinforce Christine's point about the data. Both parties presented data that was different than what I've asked them to present. Some of it has been part of the data that tennis presented was in fact from Club Track. Some of it was supplemented with other data, which I don't know the source, but in order to have apples to apples comparisons, I've asked both clubs to use only Club Track data.
Yeah, Jack, just a comment again. We only have Club Track data for a couple of years, and we were told that we could not get Club Track data for the first half of 2022 and the last 2 months of, or the first half of 2023, the last 2 months of 2022. I've recently been able to get that, but it's not in this presentation because we didn't have it. I don't know how Pickleball got it. I don't know where their data came from, but we couldn't get it.
So I think we really still come back to the original question. The original objective is, what do we do? How do we is there a need to reallocate resources? You know, I mean, I think that's different than how much money we're going to spend on new courts. You know, that's an issue that has to have a life of its own, is the long-range planning. Right now, the question was, we're resurfacing 16 courts. What color do we paint the courts? You know, is there immediate opportunity to try to reallocate resources, i.e. change tennis into pickleball courts? And 8 is an arbitrary number. I mean, 6 is an arbitrary number. You know, that's up to us and the governing board, if that decision is made, how many it would be. Okay? So, to that, let me, again, I want to, is there anyone on the committee that wants to ask a question? Mr. Parsons?
Yeah, I was just wondering if we've gone outside our community and looked at this issue. What are other communities doing? What's working, what's not? Should that be part of the decision-making here?
It could, and if I could, I'll let you talk too, Larry.
Exactly my recommendation.
Yeah, there's been a tremendous amount of research on this issue. Actually, the Tennis Association has been very active with this. You know, they have multiple documents that explain, you know, separate but equal, commingled. I mean, there's all kinds of options. So yes, and I can tell you, and the research that I've done, and I've looked at the rec departments in cities like Oklahoma City, Dallas, there's some in Pennsylvania, and basically they all say the same thing. High demand for new pickleball courts, low usage for tennis courts. How do we fix that? And some of them, actually, Larry has talked about it. They painted lines, and that works if you get 1 or 2 courts. You know, I mean, they all struggle with this identical issue that we're struggling with right now. This is not new. This has been going on, and you know, we need to bring it to closure. You know, we talked about, well, what are we going to do about restriping? You know, let's make that decision later. No. I want to quote Jack Leary when we were talking about credit card fees. And he said, credit card fees, I'm so tired of hearing about credit card fees. Well, I've heard about pickleball and I've heard about tennis I am a member of the Pickleball Club, and I have been since 2011 when we had 300 members. But my wife would call me a pickleball voyeur because I'm there just because she makes me go. Okay? And it's not that I don't like it, it's just that I've got competing priorities. So to me, you're hearing my level of frustration. And I don't know what else to say. I really want to have a discussion on this. So if any of the committees don't have it, then I'm going to open this up to the floor. Okay? Did I miss somebody here? No. Okay. Do we have anything online, Christine? Oh, wait, we'll do that after we do this. I'm sorry. I'm going to open this up to the floor. Okay? You're going to have 2 minutes, and you're going to get to talk once. Okay? Simply in the interest of time. All right? So, please come up.
Ron Wambach, 100988. All of the data that you've been getting here is paperwork data. What you need to do is go out and look at the courts, and you realize that both pickleball and tennis have a lot of space available, mainly in the afternoons, often at night, and the question therefore is, pickleball wants more courts. Tennis courts are available. Therefore, pickleball should take tennis courts, even though pickleball has courts available. Does that make any logical sense? No, it's ludicrous. This whole thing is this grandiose plan. How many pickleball courts? I play pickleball. How many pickleball courts are we going to need here in the future? 50-some pickleball courts? And they're now going to eliminate all these tennis courts? And the idea of trying to put them over at Kuntz, we've already said in the past numerous times, take Kuntz, use Kuntz for pickleball, do what you want with it over there. It doesn't suit. 3 courts have been locked up for years. The other 3 courts have been restriped. Nobody wants to play on the restriped courts. 2015, 2016, right? We had this whole thing resolved through an arbitration of sorts, whereby the pickleball club ended up getting the sands courts. The tennis club ended up assuming an obligation to take out the pickleball courts and spend $70-some thousand to put in court 16 as what was characterized as a final resolution. Go back and look it up. A final resolution to separate pickleball and tennis, and we will be happy ever after. We have people that have invested personally up to $20,000 as club members back in 2016 to facilitate this removal. Now you're going to try to say, oh, because pickleball thinks they have a need, we're going to throw this all back. You're going to rekindle another civil war if you're going to be doing this. I'm kidding you. This is not going to be a happy situation if you start screwing up a $1.5 million tennis facility, the premier facility on the west side.
Okay. Do we have others that wish to speak? Thank you. We have someone in front of you, sir. Would you sign? Would you sign in?
This is a nickel.
Would you?
This is a nickel.
Would you sign?
You hear that?
Would you sign in with your?
I'm playing pickleball, and you guys are playing tennis. I'm playing pickleball, and you guys are playing tennis.
Sir, I gave you the courtesy. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to let the record show that a gentleman presented himself to the podium and did not identify himself, nor did he include his rec card. Yes, sir.
Mike Cassandra, 112330. I was the president in 2016 when we separated these facilities. That was the best thing we ever did. Before 2016, we had all kinds of problems at the tennis courts. Since we've done that, we've had no problems of any kind. Kuntz is the best place to do this. Ron mentioned that already. It's open, it's available. It was given to them in 2020. There are pickleball lines on there, there are nets there. There is some play there still. If that place, if they needed more courts, they would be filled, those courts would be full, and they're not full. They're completely empty just about. You can go there any day and look, and there's nobody playing there. So in essence, they have 26 courts they say they have, but they actually have 32 courts. The best solution is Kuntz, as far as I'm concerned. We've been told different numbers about how many courts they want. One presentation says 6 courts, one presentation says 8 courts. There's been no plan here. This thing has bounced around up and down and sideways and every which way known to man, and it needs to be sat down, looked at with the entire group, and figured out in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Joel Piaskowski, rec card number 132267. I am the individual who has been taking pictures for the last year. At any time, I would invite all of the members here. Anytime you want to meet. I have 110 pictures on this phone, random, just selected random dates that I stopped by. Okay? Showing courts available at Sands. We're not talking about Liberty, but Sands. So you can show all the numbers you want. Okay? When you have a photo, over 100 photos showing court availability, case closed. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone online?
No comments remaining online, no.
We have one more.
130164, Eileen Freiberg. I guess I can write when I'm done. I am a past president of our club, Pickleball. I'm also a past tennis player. It does sadden me that we have to have such dissension between two clubs, but at the end of the day, I learned a few things as president. Number one is neither of those courts belong to the clubs. They belong to the association, and we are allowed to use them at our assigned times for our assigned usages. So taking on ownership that they're mine and you're going to ruin my play is not appropriate for either party to do in this presentation. The talk of pictures at Sands Courts, there's 8 courts there. 3 of those are community courts. We are not, as a club, allowed to reserve those courts for club play so that we can leave those for the community. The community comes often to our board meetings asking us to leave those courts alone, even as community members, because they don't have enough courts to reserve and use. At the end of the day, there are many split pickleball and tennis facilities around the country. I understand that one party or the other might not like them so much, but if we're going to dig into that, I've got research on about 20 of them, several country clubs, several private communities, just like Sun City West. And at the end of the day, if you want to play, you're going to find a way to play, and you adjust to different noises around you. So I'd encourage you to dig deeper, look into more things that will answer your questions, and then help us make a good decision so that we all, as Christine said, can continue to enjoy the sports we love. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else in the audience?
Shirley John, 114083. I may have misunderstood the lady that just came up. She said that there are 3 courts at Sands that are reserved for community, not for pickleball club use, and that they are not allowed to reserve them for pickleball club use even individually. The president of the pickleball club reserves the community courts, then she plays on the other courts with the pickleball group, and those courts sometimes are left empty because she reserves them for club play, and then there's not enough people there and they don't use them. I've been there many times and that has happened.
Do we have any other remarks from the audience?
Okay, my name is Harold Lind, and rec card number is 136821. I'm vice president of the tennis club, and I've been playing tennis now in Sun City West for over 10 years, since I came down here. So I've been involved in some of the fracas that's been going on previously, and now with the start of this. Basically, financially, this started out as we needed to move $160,000 out of the reserve fund so that we could resurface the courts a year ahead of time. Actually, they are 2 years past the time that they were supposed to be done because they were set up to depreciate over 5 years and then they were supposed to be resurfaced. As far as it not costing any more to make them pickleball or tennis, no. On the surface, it looks that way. In the long run, if you look at the graphs or pictures that they show where they wanted to take 8 courts on the east side of the tennis complex. Okay, out of those 8 courts, 4 of those are lit. That leaves the tennis court side with only 3 that are lit. They mentioned using temporary nets as opposed to having to go into the post-tension concrete. That has always been a concern when this thing first surfaced. I think that over at Coons, if you go down there, you'll find that the 3 have been locked up for close to 5 years. The other 3, one of them, I wouldn't even eat off that court, let alone play tennis. I mean, it's horrible. It should have been locked up a long time ago. The other 2 were resurfaced, restriped, and then they were double striped so that they were both pickleball and tennis. They are not really fit to be played on as well. There's cracks in them, raised sections. You've created a situation where you've got the temporary pickleball nets set to the side. If anyone has to chase after a ball off the court, you run the risk of running into that and maybe getting hurt. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else?
Oh, it might slow me down.
I'm sorry, please. Yes.
That's better. Hi, Don Marshall, number 132962. I am the scheduler for the Pickleball Club. I'm getting ready to put together my fall schedule, and it's a nightmare. I have 32 groups. I have open time. I have drop-in time, and I have skills time. I don't have enough courts. I will fill up the vast majority of these and also leave time for people in the community to reserve. putting this plan into motion, redo these courts, convert some to pickleball courts, gives me immediate relief. I get that this fall for the high season. For, I believe the number is $50,000 or less. If we don't do this, I continue through at least one, probably two more high seasons with very full groups, very full courts, and no relief in sight. And it's going to cost approximately 1.8 to 2.3 million is what I've heard tossed around. So this is quick, this is cheap, and the biggest problem is still that we have no long-term plan, as has been pointed out. So this is a step in the right direction. With temporary nets, it can all be undone. But it gives me relief, it gives us more courts, it gets it done cheap, and it gets it done fast. And they say you can only have 2 out of 3 of those, so I'll take whatever I can get.
Thank you. Last call. And online, do we have anything, Christine?
We do. We have a comment from Gary Bach, 135435. If there is a question on utilization, then maybe we need a neutral party to determine what the actual usage is and to do that for a full year.
We have heard multiple speakers. We've heard 2 interesting presentations. And we've heard a lot of reasons why we shouldn't do something. I haven't heard anyone say what we should do. You know, I think that the original issue that we wanted to deal with was resource allocation. And are we being good stewards of our own resources? And I think that question has yet to be answered. We have been here over 3 hours. We need deliberation time. We can't do it now. With 3 hours, you just, for any of you who have been in a situation like this, you just know that your best thinking is not done 3 hours later. So we're going to adjourn the meeting, knowing full well that we have not reached a recommendation that we can forward to the governing board. We will pick this up again at the next Budget and Finance Committee meeting, which will be May the 7th, okay? And if we don't have it then, we may have a meeting on May the 8th. So, yes, Chrissy.
Thank you for that. It's tough. I don't want to continue to kick the can down the road either, as you were saying. So if I can perhaps ask the committee really quickly, we've made a couple of recommendations that are associated with today, right? We've recommended, we were in support of the 100 as a committee, not as individuals, but as a committee. I believe we recommended moving forward on the 160 to resurface. I believe that we've moved forward. Is there any, on several of these, do any of us need time to, are we saying we need to revisit any of those decisions, number one? And then number two, where are we going? I need data. That's what I was asking. I've had 2 presentations from the community, and again, I'm grateful for all the time and enthusiasm, but the numbers don't jibe. So we need agree to use a particular data source for utilization, and I believe we already do have very strong data from Carl and his team in terms of what it would cost us for each of these options. That's just my 2 cents. So first is, does anything change for us on our past recommendations, and where do we get the data going into May 7th?
I think there is an issue that we may be able to deal with right now, and that was Director Novello's suggestion to identify this on a master plan. And I'm not sure if that should come as a recommendation out of Budget and Finance Committee. And at least we could forward that to the governing board.
Just to, and again, master plan seems to be like bad, where everybody gets all wound up about that. We just need a multi-year plan for the growth of these sports that are so loved by our community, right? So the growth and in continuing. So we just need a multi-year plan. What do we want to do going forward, and how will we get there? Without using the evil word master plan.
Yeah,
It's not evil. I'm sorry. I shouldn't make joke about it. But rather than associating that with a master plan that we've all been waiting for quite some time, we just need a multi-year plan for these two sports facilities.
I think you're right. I think if we've done nothing else today, we've identified the fact that we need to have some type of a structured multi-year plan, to meet demand. I don't know if we want to. I think we could move on that in the time that we have today, if we wanted to do that, or because we have to come back anyway. I mean, this is wide open and it's glaring, and we know that. So my question to the committee is, are we in a position that we want to make a recommendation to the governing board that some type of a formal multi-year plan be developed to meet the needs of to meet the resource needs of I hate to say pickleball, but pickleball and tennis. Hello?
I don't know.
Well,
I know we said we need deliberation time. I'm sorry, David, please.
We asked the board, this committee made a recommendation and asked the board to set priorities, much less develop a plan. And the board declined to do that. Okay, so I'm really struggling again with the information that we were provided with today, simply from the perspective of how does it fit into our responsibilities of the Budget and Finance Committee. I mean, we've already decided we were going to recommend that the board approve the $160,000 to resurface the courts. We also, I think, made the recommendation not to spend the money on the Kuntz study, okay, which kind of seems to be, maybe not the best decision we could have made. I don't play pickleball or tennis because my knees don't let me do that. So I don't have a dog in the fight either way. But again, I keep coming back and going to the fact that our community is dynamic. It changes every year. How we do things in a decision-making process to recognize that our community changes every year and the needs of the community, and thus the services provided by the rec centers need to be in step with that. We do a poor job, in my opinion, of planning those things. Okay? So this is a prime example where, if Dick was in government service, I was in government service for a long time, what you find is that things come in circles. So what I'm hearing is that we solved this problem almost 10 years ago, and now we're going to solve it again. And I'd like to think that however we solve it this time has more than a 10-year lifetime for the next time it comes up. So, I don't know what the right thing to do is. What I do know is that people move to a place like Sun City West because it's a diverse community and there's a lot of different things to do. When you get clubs that have different numbers of people that participate in them, you've got a very large club with pickleball. You have a good-sized club with tennis. I think we have to figure out a way to accommodate both of those. Okay, and I'm sorry that it got disruptive here today. Obviously, this is a topic of a great deal of passion with people. Okay, but what I found is that you can't step back and look at things coldly and dispassionately and logically. you're never going to come up with a solution. So I would really encourage people to tone things down. It's not going to buy anybody anything other than a lot of ill will to have the kind of performances we saw here today. So that's my soapbox.
Well, I think what we'll do is we're going to adjourn today. This will be on our agenda on May the 7th. I know that sounds like a long ways away. It's only 2 weeks. I feel very passionately that I want to move this forward. And I'm tired of hearing about it. You're all tired of hearing about it. We need to make a decision. We need to make a recommendation. Let me back that up. Okay. And I think the last thing I'll say is to remind all of you that the people on this dais are your neighbors, they're your friends, they're the ones that you see at Fry's. So just keep that. Yes, we're 8 imperfect people trying to make a perfect decision for a perfect recommendation. So at that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. It is, by anyone's curiosity, it is 12:13. This is a 3-hour and 13-minute meeting. So, oh, and I do want to thank 3 people. I want to thank Larry Plaster. I want to thank Ken Holtz. I want to thank Coke Schaefer. You know, I know that this was a painful effort for you. I know that some of the things that were said were not the things you wanted to hear. They're the things that had to be heard. You all did a very fine job on preparation and delivery, and I thank you very much for that. Alrighty, this meeting is adjourned.